Try getting.
I only see one person at a time, different than the planning board meeting.
Okay, we're live.
So for the first time by webinar, we are opening a meeting of the Harbor and Coastal Zone Management Commission. Can I get I will make a motion to open the meeting. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, folks. Good to see your face, Andrew. I don't think I have to instruct anybody where the exits are. I guess this time we do need web instructions. People need to, need to know that if they are members of the public and want to comment, and there will be public comment periods for at least 2 agenda items tonight, they should use the raise their hand function, and Greg Cutler, who has taken the responsibility for running the technical aspects of the webinar, will make sure that you can be heard, so that this is truly a public meeting. Anybody who's at home watching this in these, extremely unusual circumstances, and anybody that is participating by webinar as a member of the public, I really appreciate that you care enough about your community to be involved, even with everything that we're all dealing with. And thank you to all my commissioners for coming in and being a part of this tonight. We are moving public business forward in the most unusual of circumstances.
Chair, may I interject and make a plug for something, if you don't mind?
Go ahead.
So today is Census Day. So I urge everybody to please fill out your census form at 2020census.gov. That's it. I'll keep it short.
And that too is important public business. Do we have any of the applicants with us yet? You're able to patch them in as soon as we call their matter?
Yes.
Okay. We probably don't have any need for preliminaries. Let's go right to Shore Road.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Tony Joffrey is here on behalf of the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Joffrey.
Good evening. It's good to see you all, and I wish you all healthy and safe in this time.
Thank you, and you as well.
Thank you.
So I think we have several different issues that we want to address as we see One Shore Road yet again. I want to address first the SECRA issue, which we left open last time. I am going to make a motion that we adopt the typing applied by the planning board, which is not the same thing as coming to an independent determination about the typing. We would simply adopt it. Can I get a second on that motion?
Second.
And I'm just going to do this from on my screen. Commissioner Hayne?
Yes. Second.
Commissioner O'Rourke?
Aye.
Vice Chair?
Aye.
Commissioner Gelber? Your audio cut out at the wrong time. Tony's muted.
Aye.
Let me see if I can.
There we
Thank
go.
you. Commissioner Neufeld
No.
and Commissioner Roney.
No, because it's a permitting action that's different from the planning board typing it.
Okay. Thank you, folks. So we've got we're past the SECRA issue for the evening. Now, the second issue that I wanted to address about this, and you're on, Mr. Joffrey, is the geothermal heat and its intersection with the 100-foot wetland buffer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first and foremost, we want to apologize on behalf of the applicant in submitting the site plan depicting the location of the boreholes to you only about a month ago. So I do want to state that up front first and foremost. With that being said, Mr. Gramberg submitted some correspondence on March 6th, identifying the locations of the boreholes on a site plan. 8 of the boreholes are on the border within the 100-foot wetland buffer. The balance of the boreholes are outside of the 100-foot wetland buffer. With that being said, all of the boreholes are located under the proposed home in an area that is disturbed. With that, I'd like to hand it off to Mr. Gramberg just to walk you through the benefits of the system. As indicated in his correspondence, it is a very costly system. I understand that the applicant can only recover the cost of this over a period of at least 15 to 20 years, but it is a much more environmentally responsible system. So with
Okay,
that-
because I don't want to spend a lot of time on issues that I don't think are pertinent to any action this commission will take. You don't have to sell me on why geothermal heat is a wonderful thing, and if any other commissioner wants to go into that, they're welcome to ask about it. But for my part, I want to focus on the part of this that intersects with the wetlands and therefore is a wetland permit issue. Now, when I looked at the map, and please someone correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm fully capable of misreading a plan. When I looked at it, the boreholes are under the house, but there is a run of pipes that are grouped together and then split off to each borehole individually. And that run of pipes travels in a big right angle well past the 100-foot buffer. Am I reading that right?
Actually, if it may be helpful, I can do a screen share showing the map so everyone can actually see.
I think it would be.
Okay.
Okay, give me one moment to promote you to a panelist here.
And again,
Thomas,
that's Michael Stein, Hudson Engineering.
Yep.
Thomas, can I make
Got
a
it.
comment?
You can, go ahead.
So, NYSERDA, New York State Energy Resource and Development Authority, has a program pushing very strongly what they're called renewable heating and cooling techniques. And this is really heat pumps. And especially for this location, I think the heat pump is the right application. And Cortland County, I think, is upstate, or Tompkins County, which is a much colder county than ours. People are putting in, or were up until a month ago, putting in heat pumps in lieu of everything else because they're highly efficient and they're relatively environmentally benign. So I would, in my personal opinion, a geothermal in a wetland or a wetlands buffer is really not ideal. The New York State Energy Research Development Authority is giving huge tax or investment tax credits, some type of a credit for these heat pump systems. So that would be the direction I'd be going in.
Well, that's useful. Let's just take a look at this map for a second, and I see.
So
Now,
this
I'm not
red
sure.
line,
Go ahead. I'm not sure I
Red-
understand what's the in run and what's the out run. I see the boundaries.
okay, so these two red lines are the 100-foot buffer lines that come
Right.
along both sides. This is the footprint of the house
Right.
through here. So any of the wells that are located within the buffer are actually located within the footprint of the house. They're in crawl space within the footprint of the house.
Right.
So it doesn't result in any more disturbance within the buffer because it's part of where the construction is taking place in under the house already. And then these areas here are basically underneath the parking court, right in front of the house.
I got that. What I'm looking at is the pipe runs in gray and charcoal.
Here.
And those are carrying pipes. Now, which one's the out and which one's the in?
Ira, I think you maybe better answer that. You there, Ira?
Let me see if I can get
She was
him.
on a moment ago.
I gotta get out of the screen.
Ask her where the in pipes go in and out pipe.
Okay, I'm unmuting. It's not working.
You know what I'm doing? Can I just put you on the speaker? Oh. If can people hear me?
Yes.
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 So I have a Chris from Cum Laude on the line. Chris is just 6 days from dealing with coronavirus, where he was in bed.
Oh my.
And has just come through this thing. And so that's why I did not ask him to join, but in light of the focus on this, he's come out of bed to get on the phone to talk to about the in pipes and out pipes. And so Chris, they're looking at a form here. Some is in kind of that Michael Stein just put up. Some of it is in there. Chairman Burt's asking about the in pipes and out pipes. There's some pipes that look in gray and some are in black, and maybe you can't see it, but maybe you can describe it.
Sure. If you look at the map that Mike Stein has shown, I drew that up with one of the guys that I worked with, John Sweeney. And I think we located approximately 10 wells on that. These wells are drilled directly straight down vertical, and the pipes are inserted into the well down as well, and then grouted. There's no transfer of water or anything at all into the wells at all. It's solely for the purpose of removing heat from the ground. So there's no pumping of water from the ground. It's just the pipe is placed in there and it's there forever. That's it. The transfer of energy, of heat, takes place between the pipe, the grouted well around it, and then the rock around it. So each on the map that you see, excuse me.
Okay, so go ahead.
You can see each well is placed and the pipes go directly into the well. And then from the well, they go into the house. We located some of the wells in the house because we thought that would just be easier for the site as a whole to, have them as close to the source of where we needed this energy.
Thank you. That's useful. So the gray run is the return run.
I don't remember the colors and I don't have it in front of me.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you the reason I'm asking, because either the charcoal gray, because of the two, the lighter gray, the ones represented in lighter gray, run a big right angle on the seaward side of the wetland buffer line, near the tennis court, under the edge of the tennis court.
Yep.
What I was asking is that the outrun or the in-run?
I'm not 100% sure because I don't see.
So Chris, the gray. So just if this helps, the gray run is the outer run. So if you're going to the from the driveway area, the gray is the one that just gently kind of hits right to where the tennis court is. The dark line is within inside.
Okay, it could be when they. You guys, that the lines get darker and darker because we generally run the lines together, and each line going to each well is 2 1/4 pipes. That's all it is. They're very small pipes that they go down into the ground, and that's it. So the pipe literally goes from the unit inside, and then water gets pumped down and back up to each well individually.
Now, as I look at it, I'm thinking that the impact on, since this is all disturbed area, and since these pipes, as you said, don't exchange any fluid, only energy, I understand that. So in its steady state, in good repair, if nothing goes wrong, it seems to me that I am not particularly concerned about any environmental impact. But what I need to know from you is, how can we count on it staying that way, and what happens if it does not? I need to know, for example, what kind of pressure they carry polypropylene glycol in water, right? What kind of pressure do they have, and how long do they last? What happens?
Chris, if you could, Chairman Burt was still speaking. If you could just now begin your answer.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
We try to limit the amount of propylene glycol in these systems. We try to use it as much as 100% water when we can. It depends upon how many wells. Usually, if it's a propylene glycol system, we would try and one of the reasons that we would do that is it reduces the amount of wells. We can kind of increase the temperature tolerances in those wells by using less wells, but using propylene glycol. Some companies use entirely propylene glycol in them, but I find that the water exchange, or the thermal exchange between the propylene glycol and the water exchange is better than the propylene glycol. So we generally do systems that have very little polypropylene glycol in them. Now, it's a closed system. So if there was a leak in one of these wells, I've done, in the amount of systems I've done in the past 13, 14 years, this is probably in the low 30s of the amount of systems I've done. Some larger than this system, some smaller. I've done some as little as 2 wells, and I've done some as much as, say, 20 wells. But I've probably put in, with the same company, Connecticut Wells, I've probably put in the range of, let me think, maybe over 500 of these wells, and I've had 0 problems and leaks later. Once the well is grouted and done, they don't leak because it's a tested loop that comes in from the company. Once they drop it down, it's already pre-tested, and there are no joints in the entire loop going down. It's all factory done. And I've done 500 of these individual wells with 0 leaks in any of them.
Okay, I want to stop you a second because you keep saying well.
100 years.
Okay, let me stop you a second because you keep saying well. The wells are all on the inland side of the 100-foot buffer, and I just, you may be using that as an umbrella term, but I'm really concerned with the return pipe run that's going out into the wetland buffer.
Sure. What I like to do on the return pipelines, there's 2 different ways we can do it, and the way I like to do it is I like to run individual returns from each well into the house. Sometimes guys will manifold out in the field, and then we'll bring in just 1 or 2 lines. We'll gang them together outside. I've done it both ways, but generally speaking, I prefer running them in individually, only because it gives me flexibility. Sometimes if I gang them all together, I'm not 100% sure if I'm getting thermal exchange from each well. But the pipes that come back in are the same HDPE pipe, and it's a fused pipe. Again, I've done 500 of them. I've had no leaks.
Okay, so let me ask you this: the way you've just described this, you say you like to do it a certain way, you gang pipes under certain circumstances. It's sounding to me like the pipe runs that are represented in the map in the plan we received are not set in stone, literally or figuratively. That it's a representation of how the system may be built, but it's not a final schematic for what you're actually going to do. Is that right?
Exactly. I could run into something underground that would make me bring a pipe around. Let's say I have a big rock or something. I like to have about 4 feet of cover on these pipes as they're coming from the well back into the house. And they might not go exactly because we don't know exactly what's underground ever until we dig it up.
Okay. So if it were beneficial to you to run, to make sure that the pipe runs stayed entirely outside of the 100-foot wetland buffer, could you accomplish that?
I am unfamiliar with not having it in front of me. I couldn't answer that question. Maybe Mike Stein could.
Chris, I'd actually text you it to your phone.
Chris, 1 sec. Chris, sorry, 1 second. Mike's speaking. Sorry, 1 sec, Chris.
Chris, I actually text you a photo of it to your phone. So.
Oh, okay, great. Let me take.
Hey, Chris.
In the meantime,
yeah.
Thomas.
Yes.
I'm not only the wetlands buffer should we be concerned about. Let me lower the volume here. But if I remember correctly, isn't this in a VE18 zone, flood zone?
No.
No? What flood zone is this?
Michael, I'll let you comment.
Yep, I'm just opening up it now.
It was reassessed the
We filed a LOMA. We filed a letter of map amendment revision to take it out of the flood zone.
And it was taken out. Michael, you'll pull it up, but it was taken out by the U.S. government.
Right, but on the border of the property, I see a topo of 10.
Yeah, I believe where all these wells are and all of the return piping is is significantly outside the flood zone as designated by the remapping of the property. But I'll let Michael answer it officially.
Just bear with me 1 second.
Yeah.
There it is. It says zone X boundary, and
So that's just the structure?
Just one sec, Chris. They're just asking Michael about the flood zone, which was remapped.
so right here we have zone X boundary,
Mhm.
and it wraps around through here. So it's
I don't know what you're referring to.
zone X, so it's outside of the flood zone.
That's correct. The Loma took it out and put it in, out of the flood zone and into the zone X.
Understood, but on the border of your property with your next door neighbor, there is a topo line of 10. I see 15 near where this geothermal unit is going to be. I think it's 15. It's kind of low over there. And if I don't have the FEMA map in front of me, but I seem to recall it's a VE18 zone here.
No, this is right where you see the geothermal wells. That's, I'm just trying to figure out switching back and forth.
Can you
Right
put
here.
up the map to the FEMA, Lomar?
Right here is where the zone X boundary is. That's where it was brought out to. Follow along where my mouse is. That's the zone
I
X.
don't
Can't
see the mouse.
We can't, Michael, we can't see the mouse.
Oh,
Michael, we can sometimes. I think you might be indicating something that might be on your screen and not ours.
okay.
If you restart the share screen, you may be able to change your setting. You might have just a window shared instead of
There
the
we
whole
go.
screen.
Window share.
There we
You
go.
see it now?
There you go. Yep.
All right.
So there's a zone X boundary that wraps all the way around through there. So all this work is completely outside of the flood zone.
And Michael, if you go back to the other plan, you can see the elevations that are 14.9 by the 10 court, 15 to the right of the pipes, and 15 to the bottom of the pipes on the plan that we're looking at. Not this plan, but the last plan we were looking, the geothermal plan.
Is the geothermal plan up now?
No.
No, is this the existing conditions?
Correct.
Okay.
I can comment on the location of those benches whenever you're ready.
And the motor core is approximately elevation 16.
Okay,
So Greg, is this a VE18 flood zone?
All right, Chris, just 1 minute.
Take your time, Peter.
I was just looking at the map, which is obviously different than the Lomer, so it would have to be confirmed against that. But where the house is located is not showing in the National Flood Hazard Layer as being within the flood zone. Hold on, pulling it up again. And I'm showing zone VE in a portion of it, but it's all meaningless without
It's VE what,
reviewing the
Greg?
Lomer. 15.
15. Okay, I was wrong.
okay.
Can we, Chairman Burke, can we just, because Chris is literally out of bed for this, can he finish whatever questions you had for him?
Yeah, I think that's advisable. And again, I'm sorry to drag you out of convalescing from this virus. Thank you for being with us.
Just for clarity, the light colored gray that goes past the red line I'm seeing on the map
Yes.
does not take place in that fashion. We can double up the black and it can run both in the same black areas. The gray doesn't need to take place at all whatsoever.
Okay. Does any other specific to this aspect, the geothermal heat? Do any other commissioners have any questions?
I do. So this is Tony. So Chairman Burke, that fluid in that system is some type of antifreeze. I think it was mentioned propylene glycol. If that leaks into the environment, it's definitely an environmental hazard. And so I think the fact that there are alternate systems out there that are being promoted very heavily and funded very heavily, I think this is not the correct system for this particular location. So
Again, I don't believe in a propylene glycol system here. The amount of propylene glycol that would be in each well, I think, is less than 5%. It's 95% water. And sometimes it's just performance that we need the propylene glycol for. I can also talk to the guys. They actually prefer complete water and not using any propylene glycol at all. So generally speaking, all of the geothermal systems I've done are 95% above water. And it's possible I could do it with all water, but I would have to check on that to see. Because it's just, it's an effective, in different seasons, there's different dynamics that happen, and we have to make sure that, the water going through just doesn't freeze on us, that's all.
I agree. And if it gets really cold outside, the problem with just the all water system is that if it freezes, the pipes will break. But even if this pipe,
Not if it's
hang on a second, please, let me finish. Even if this pipe leaks a little bit, you're still getting 5% glycol in either a wetland or a wetland buffer. So I think that from an environmental point of view, this is not the right system for this location.
But when you're speaking about the depth of the line, you're looking at the same depth as a water main is going in. We have 4 feet of cover. That's the reason why it's put to that depth in this area of the country, because it's below the frost depth, which then and therefore it wouldn't freeze.
But it's usually not the frost that's coming from the air. It's that as the water removes, or as the water removes heat from the loop and transfers it into the house, that's the action that's causing the water to freeze, not the outside air temperature, right? So it's not a direct.
No, that's not correct.
Sorry, Michael. Hey, Chris, 1 second. Michael, would you speak? And then Chris wanted to respond to Tony. Michael, go ahead. And then Chris.
Yeah, that's not correct. The temperature that the ground in the house is bringing this water to is, you're talking 55 degrees. That's the normal temperature of the ground. That this is the whole purpose of using it. It's not going down to
Michael, let me interrupt. I operate these systems at work. I know these systems inside out. When that outside temperature goes down, you're correct. They're designed to run at 50 degrees, 55 degrees. But as the winter goes on, these systems get colder and colder. And that's why they put the glycol in them, so that they don't freeze. So my point is twofold.
I disagree.
Well, you can disagree, but to me, if you got glycol in a system near a wetland, it's unacceptable.
Tony, there's a difference between ethylene glycol and propylene glycol, right?
It's still an environmental contaminant, Andrew. I agree there's a difference.
Okay, it's only a difference. And let me just ask you, coming out of the house, it seems like the lines are more than 5 feet deep. Is that correct?
Yes, they're generally around 5 feet deep. That's correct.
But in the plan, it looks like there's 5 feet of soil on top. Is it 5 feet? Is it 6 feet or 4 feet? How deep exactly is it?
6, but they're never less than 4 feet deep.
Okay.
So is there a way to move the system outside of the wetlands buffer?
He said yes.
Thank you.
Or just to be clear on the record, he said that it is not necessary. There is a way to do that. It's not necessary that it run through the wetland buffer, so which is a little less than a commitment to do that, but at least that's on the table.
Was this on the site plan the planning board had?
No, it was not, but we will make sure that the applicant submits that information to the planning board before approval.
So they have to modify that one, I assume, right?
So real quick, in terms of the antifreeze, I understand you're trying to minimize the amount of antifreeze. but the only antifreeze option you have is propylene glycol, correct?
Chris, did you hear that question?
I didn't quite hear. Could you repeat that, please?
I understand that you're trying to minimize the amount of antifreeze in the lines. But the only option you have for antifreeze is propylene glycol. Is that correct? Or would there be another chemical that you would substitute?
There might be another substitute for it. I don't know. I can check into it. I did just text the air conditioning guy that I work with all the time with a couple different questions on that. I don't know if he's going to get back to me or not. But I would assume yes. And again, most of the time that what we have is a food grade antifreeze, and it's less than 5% of the fluid in the well itself. Now, when you look at it from a leaking point of view, and I have had no leaks in all these different systems I've ever done before, through every single one, 500 wells at least. If there was a leak in any of these wells, it's not like there's a gigantic amount that it can leak. It can only leak out what's in that well itself. There's not a big vat of some chemical.
No, we understand it, right. What's the volume of the whole system? What's the volume of the whole system?
Chris, did you hear that? Andrew just asked, what's the volume of the whole system?
I don't know that on top of my head. No, I'm sorry.
May I make a suggestion to the commission and
Can.
potentially to our village attorney to see if this is acceptable? But I know that for stormwater sanitary systems, stormwater systems, we do a maintenance agreement. Maybe that's a vehicle for this, included in a maintenance agreement.
Yeah, but Greg, to me,
but there's no maintenance on these wells once they put in. I've never gone back to a well that I put in the past. But if you need it just from a legal point of view, I would say that would be a good question for the lawyers. I'm sure they could figure out something for you.
I mean, let me come at it this way. Nothing lasts forever. There's no human built system that's going to last forever. At some point, the pipes would degrade. I don't know when that is, but at some point the pipes would degrade. And you said you've done about 500 wells. How over what time period?
14 years now since I did my first one. Might be 15 years.
If one of them started leaking, how much would it have to leak before you'd have some indication in the system that you were losing fluid? Because nothing adds fluid, right? Fluid in there is the fluid in there.
No, generally speaking, the guys look at it maybe once or twice a year. And from what I understand, if they add a gallon or two of water to it, that's it. They might lose it in the machine cells. Sometimes something could.
Now that hang on though, because that may answer my question. If they're occasionally adding a gallon or two of water, that means that a closed system that shouldn't have evaporation is losing a gallon or two of water over some period.
Well, it's not evaporation truly. It's just the actual stuff. The guys go in there, they open it up. It could have settled out a little bit on them. The pipe expands or could contract a little bit. There's different reasons why they might have to add some water. I've never seen anybody add any glycol to it. I have seen stuff where the guys have water. I've also had systems sometimes where people opened up a valve in a basement and, open up and, say 10 or 15 gallons of water went onto the floor. We had to go back and add water to it. But the water that's spilled on the floor in the house was really just water. It has very, very low, antifreeze in it. So we just mopped up the water and the guys put more water back in, rebalanced because, housekeeper or somebody, people have opened these things up over the course of time. But that's inside the house in the boiler room. There's nothing to access on the outside of the house. They're built up lawns or driveways or sometimes under the house itself.
Okay, but
in order to try to move this ahead, would the commission consider a yearly inspection with a maintenance agreement with the requirement of the filing of the inspection on a yearly basis, with the caveat that we would relocate these pipes outside the wetland buffer to the extent practicable to the satisfaction of Mr. Cutler?
And to give you to answer your question, I just ran the numbers for volume. based upon the 500-foot depth, you're talking about 50 gallons total.
Yeah, it's not.
50 gallons?
Correct.
Okay.
If so, at 50 gallons total, you're and at 5% antifreeze, you're talking about 2.5 gallons.
Yeah.
Yes.
2.5
Okay.
gallons.
And importantly, I think also that any topping off ever, if there is topping off, is done in water.
Yes.
Yeah.
You need to maintain that 5%. So you got to top it off with whatever maintains your 5%. Otherwise, you lose your antifreeze. And if you get a really cold winter, the pipes will freeze.
Antifreeze is super critical for us because we're looking to use water instead of antifreeze. Other companies, I've worked with some other companies that use 100% glycol, and it's a different kind of system. This is a water system.
So what happens if the system were to have significant failures, such that the entire volume, 50 gallons of water with 5% antifreeze, were to leak into the surrounding soil, and now you've got 2.5 gallons of propylene glycol in the soil? How far does that go, and what does it do to the environment, given that we're in, at the boundary of two different water environments and a significant habitat?
So Thomas, this is Tony. I think DEC would consider that a spill.
Sorry, Chris, you want to answer?
It is a food grade antifreeze.
Can you explain food grade antifreeze, Chris?
It's an edible material. This is not a toxic material at all.
It is used in the food preparation industry and is considered safe.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with the propylene glycol as well. As long as the system uses propylene glycol or an equivalent, I think that satisfies me.
Well, if I'm being too thorough, then I will take my lumps for having been too thorough. But because of the habitat that we're talking about here, I want to just finish out the thinking on Commissioner Gelber's question. If you spilled 2.5 gallons of propylene glycol on the property, what would that be a spill of an environmental contaminant?
I don't think so.
I mean, I understand it's not going to kill you. It's food grade. You could drink it out of a glass. I understand that. But would that be considered an environmental contaminant spill if you dumped 2.5 gallons of this antifreeze, of this food grade antifreeze, on the property?
Let me look it up now.
Well, what's interesting is food grade and humans are one thing, but when you have plankton, fish, birds, smaller size, different mammal.
Now, of course, 2.5 gallons is the worst case scenario because that's the content of the entire system, but also that's 4 feet under the surface of the soil. And now we're talking about outside the wetland buffer. So that's many, many feet of soil from the environments that could be harmed by that. But beyond that, I don't know, because I'm encountering this. I'm asking you questions I would have asked if I'd known about it earlier, except I'm asking them now because it's the first time I've been able to talk about this. So if someone could address that, that'd be really helpful.
I have the answer here. I'm online. I'm reading from the CDC, and it says, in contrast to ethylene glycol, propylene glycol is generally recognized as safe, GRAS, additive for foods and medications. Propylene glycol rarely causes toxic effects, and then only under very unusual circumstances. Uses.
Does it say anything about fish and wildlife?
I just saw a search for that. It's used in medicines, cosmetics, food, acts as an emulsifying agent, industrial drying agent, surfactant, solvent. It's in foods, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics.
I don't think fish and wildlife deal with this.
I think, Maureen, no, I don't mean to be argumentative. If it's in pharmaceuticals, that's a fairly mission critical stuff. I've done a lot in the food industry. If something's made its way passable into pharmaceuticals, no offense, with this amount amortized over all these wells, I feel like we're getting a little bit adventurous if we think that's going to hurt plankton.
There's another quality piece of information here. It says concentrations in food range from 0.001% to up to 15%. So your solution is 5%, right?
Yeah,
5% over 50 gallons.
So you could triple that in soup, and it wouldn't be toxic to
Is
kids.
there, since we're now looking at a system entirely outside the buffer, can someone from the applicant's team tell me if there were a spill of, let's call it a gallon, if there were a spill of which is a bad case scenario, if there were a spill of a gallon of propylene glycol in water, how far could we expect it to move from the area of soil it spilled in if it spilled in a crack in the pipe run?
Yeah, I have no experience with a spill of propylene glycol and how it would interact around it. I haven't had that issue with it before, so I don't know.
If I may, I just checked the New York State list of hazardous materials. It's 6 CRRNY 597.3, and it's not listed as a hazardous material on the DEC website.
Yeah, that's the best of my knowledge, is it's not a hazardous material.
Okay, that's helpful to know. If anyone else has questions about the geothermal or the polypropylene or the propylene glycol in the system, now's the time to ask them. Martin, David, Seamus.
You know, my only comment is that, you know, the percentage, as you said, Thomas, if the whole system blows and 2.5 gallons get spilled, I think the spread on that would probably be, you know, 20 to 30 feet, probably, you know, which wouldn't enter into the flood zone. So that would be a major failure. But even if there's a tiny leak and the percentage is 5%, I can't see it really affecting the environment too substantially.
Okay, so as we understand the application now, are you making it part of the record that the pipe runs will remain outside the buffer? They will be 4 feet under the soil minimum depth, and that the polypropylene glycol in the system as a whole will not exceed 5%?
Chris, can we locate this completely out of the wetland buffer?
Yeah, on the little map that I'm looking at, I see the red line, and that's where the black lines go through it. I can keep all the trenches on the black lines instead of using any of the gray at all. I can double them up, so I don't need that other trench.
Okay, that certainly helps me understand what it is I'm voting on here. Okay, commissioners, I'm gonna move off this issue unless anyone else wants to be heard on the heating system.
I'm just going
So to
to
clarify that, sorry,
Yeah.
Tony.
No, I'm just going to say that air source heat pumps are what NYSERDA, is what NYSERDA, the Energy Authority of the State of New York, is recommending. And especially for this area, we are the environmental body for the village of Mamaroneck, and to allow a system like this in this area, to me, is not a good precedent to set, and especially that there are options. So that's my 2 cents.
Is there a reason that they haven't adopted or aren't following on some of the alternatives that you've mentioned?
I can comment on the air source heat pump if you like.
Yeah. Chris, can you comment on that?
Sure.
By the way, Chris, before you comment, I just want to say, Tony, independent of your perspective on it, we originally were going to go with a conventional system.
Correct.
Somebody told me this was going to cost a lot more money, but was good for the environment. So I said, let's spend the money because it's good for the environment. So I just want you to know that's where my heart was when we made this decision in the first place. So anyway, you want to, Chris, you want to follow up?
Yeah, there's two different parts. Well, a couple parts of it is on the air source heat pumps, which if we use a regular HVAC system, those are regular condensing units. The air source heat pump is the same, and the visibility of those for the neighbors and the sound of those to the neighbors as well are much greater than doing geo. Geo, you have just the noise of when you drill the wells themselves, and then it's over forever. All of the equipment is inside the house in the basement. So it's not like the other neighbor is sitting out on his dock or on his rear lawn and listening to your air conditioners go off. It's completely silent. So there's a big benefit from the fact that neighbors love Geo because they don't have to hear anybody's air conditioners, and that's one nice thing. Only from an efficiency point of view, pretty much if you go to a super high-end air source heat pump, you might be able to get it up to about 20 SEER, and Geo can be between 26 and 28 SEER. So it is a lot more efficient itself, just from an efficiency and energy usage point of view. Although it is much more expensive on the install. That's very true.
I'd like to add to that, if I may, Ira Granberg here. I'd like to reinforce what Steve is saying. Based on the zones of the house and the ability to put conventional air systems in versus the geothermal, we would need approximately 8 condensing units around the entire house. And condensing units or heat pump units have a certain distance they can be from the mechanical room sources. And that would require distribution throughout on both the east side and the west side of the house. The geothermal system eliminates the need to do that. It's not only a more energy efficient system, but from the heat that the typical condensing unit emits into the atmosphere, this doesn't exist in this type of system. And to reinforce what Steve said, is the lines you're looking at on the plan are graphic lines. The pipes don't go at 90 degrees, they're flexible, and they can be put in similar bundles. So if we're going outside of the wetland buffer and we're reducing the amount of exterior equipment by an enormous amount, I think these are mitigating considerations that everyone should look at.
Thanks.
Well, and just because we always try to be as clear about this with applicants as we can, mitigation is not a word that gets a lot of use in consistency determination because we don't balance one thing against another. I understand you weren't using it in that sense, but hairs on my neck go up every time. So I just want to make sure that we're as transparent as we can be about that. We're looking for consistency, which means nothing that's contrary to the policies that we serve.
Correct, I understand that. I'm just indicating that these were choices that were originally made in terms of the benefits of the system.
Right, okay.
Right.
So to clarify, that piping is going to be moved out of the wetland buffer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it can be. Yes.
Well, it can, or, yeah, it will be.
It will be.
Will it or can it be?
I'm saying as the applicant, it will be. If that makes you
Thank
comfortable, and because I want to do what's right, that's what we're going to do. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Gross. I got that loud and clear.
Okay.
Okay. I think we've got everybody's thinking on the heating system aspect. I want to keep us moving forward. So we need to deal with the marine structures part of this application, and that requires that we open a meeting for public comment, which we have not done on that yet. In order to make sure everybody understands where we're at, including members of the public that may not have had much time to look at the submitted materials, there's a March, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Joffrey, March 4 submission regarding the boat lift, which has been the most talked about issue of the marine structures aspect, which lays out an alternative that is different from the pier-based boat lift we had originally talked about, which would be lower in profile and wouldn't create the boat hanging in space way above the water phenomenon that we have discussed from a few different aspects in prior meetings. Do I have that right?
We did provide a March 4th submission. We did provide Grace Coastal Engineering, included some information. Azure D. Sleicher provided a narrative with respect to some of the comments and questions, provided some specifications with respect to the type of boat lift, actually very lengthy materials that were submitted in our Exhibit A, as well as demonstrating at the very end of that exhibit locations of similar type of boat lifts along the coastline on the Sound, primarily in Greenwich and Darien and Stanford, for your edification. So to the extent you have any questions, or if you'd like us to go through that, I can have, I believe Azure's on the line, and I can have her walk you through that.
Okay, so first of all, our convalescing HVAC engineer, I think, can now return to convalescing, and I really appreciate the effort. At this point, before we get into the commissioners and applicants discussion, this seems like a good time to me to hear from the public, because if there are members of the public that want to be heard on this, that may guide or alter what we want to talk about with regard to the marine structures. So I'm gonna, I don't need a motion for that, right? I just call for it as chair, Greg.
I believe you do.
Yeah. Okay.
For a
I'm now
public hearing.
opening the public hearing, and members of the public who want to be heard on this should use the raise hand function on their Zoom screen down at the bottom, and Greg will let you talk.
I'll second Thomas.
It's not a motion. Turns out that's just the chair's prerogative. So I'm opening it. Members of the public, if you want to be heard on the marine structures section of this application, now's your chance. I will thank you for any comment that you choose to share with the commission. Go ahead.
And if you have a problem raising your hand, please send me an email and I'll unmute you.
And in deference to those of our citizens who do want to participate, I'm gonna hold this open for a good minute to make sure that if they want to do so, they have that opportunity.
Do we know how many people are in the audience?
We had 30 participants the last time I looked at the Zoom figures.
There are 16 attendees. I don't know how many people are watching on YouTube. But I see no hands raised.
Yeah, like I said, I'm going to give them more than a full minute, because this is public business. We're all neighbors here, and I'm not going to have them not be heard just because somebody's a little unfamiliar with the technology.
Greg,
Thomas, do we have
your email just in case someone is trying to do that?
Yep, I've been checking and doing the send receive to make sure I get updates.
But
the question I had was, is the public aware of how to join this and actually comment?
Yeah, so we've done a news blast that includes the instructions on how to join and how to participate. So it's on the planning department site, and we also included it in the emails that go out to the residents.
If I were just watching this tonight, how would I know how to log in to be able to ask a question?
That's on the public notice that's on the website that has been made available. So if you look at the agenda, all the information is right there.
Greg also provided his email at the top of the webinar so that anybody unfamiliar could contact him. All right. I think that members of the public who wanted to comment have had a reasonable opportunity to do so. So I'm going to close the public comment portion, at least on just as to the marine structures on One Shore Road. And I guess this is now a discussion just for the commission, the applicant, and our professionals. So, Mr. Joffrey, we reached out to you back when we all lived more normal lives and thought that we were going to meet the evening of the 18th. We reached out to you and let you know that we would be amenable to moving the meeting up in order to not interfere with work on the house itself, which has only progressed on an emergency permit so far, though that's fairly far. And also to ask if the applicant would consider dealing separately with the marine structures aspects. And it's my understanding that having been contacted about those two questions, you declined either to deal with the portions of the application separately, or to move it up to, I think what we were offering then was March 12th. Just want to make sure that's on the record.
That is on the record, and that's consistent as well as with the comments that were made at the end of the last appearance before the commission with regard to separation. We are moving forward with the application respectfully for the marine structures permit as well as the consistency determination for the balance of the application.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the commissioners for questions on the marine structures. Vice Chair?
I have I've seen the no profile boat lift. I feel a little bit better about that system versus the original one. I did go out on Monday, that was the 30th, at 10:04 with Joe Russo, the harbor master, to actually determine what the low tide depth was all across the property at the projected construction site of the pier and the dock. And we got a uniform depth of at least 3 feet. So based on the Race Coastal letter, I believe it was dated March 4th, Race states that the if we take the 3 feet, I think your satellite calculations were less, but let's say 3 feet because it's to the benefit of the applicant. 3 feet is mean low water. What and the DEC mandates that the bottom of the dock or the boat lift has to be suspended 2.5 feet from the bottom. How is that going to work? You have 6 inches of water, 3 feet minus 2.5 as per the DEC leaves you 6 inches. How is that going to make this boat lift or dock functional at low tide?
This is Azure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Azure Slicher, Race Coastal Engineering. It's not. We've been indicating all along that Mr. Gross's use of both the dock and the boat lift are going to be limited even during low tide. So he does have to work the tides, but having the lift there allows him to keep a boat at the dock during a low tide condition. He still may not be able to exit off the boat lift on the boat at that time.
Okay. And do you have a plan for the dock and that no profile lift, or are you just going to go with the no profile lift because that actually acts as a dock? Were you planning on having a floating dock and the no profile boat lift?
Yes, it would be both. As indicated on the plans, there's a floating component and the no profile boat lift is just next to it to house the boat.
Right, but did the old plan anticipate the no profile boat lift?
Actually, yes, we've always anticipated the no profile boat lift. It was only recently that I understood from the group that there was there's a disconnect on what we were proposing versus what was envisioned. But that's 95% of our projects. We specify, most of our clients do like the no profile lift, both in its features, its its look, and its function. So that was always our vision for that particular model. And I apologize that it didn't come clear, more clear in the beginning, but we never really talked about specific models.
Yeah, but the last rendering we saw where there was a blue hull boat on the 4 piles on the boat lift, and there was some discussion about, is it in the fully up position or is it just 1 foot above the water? That's not what the low profile boat lift, which I happen to like, and I think is an improvement, is a totally different structure. I don't think that the rendering you did is an accurate representation of the no profile boat lift. Totally different. It's a different system. It's like it's an elevated dock with a moving floor. And that was the other question. I went on YouTube, I looked at all the different are you using a no profile platform lift or a no profile cradle lift? Because they're two different systems. They have two different aesthetics to them.
I don't know that we've determined quite yet, but if there's a preference of this commission, then we can lean towards one.
Yeah, I honestly, I think the no profile in terms of aesthetics, I think the no profile lift is definitely an improvement. I would want to see some kind of sketch. It doesn't have to be a super sophisticated type of thing. I would just want to know with more specificity, using the platform, using the cradle. There was also some railings that were an option. There was some lighting. I think you're gonna need some light out there if you're using the boat at night, but those are all considerations. Also colors. No profile comes in some pretty tropical colors. I think the commission should kind of consider more of a neutral or an earth tone color. And the railings seem to be a little bit unsightly. I would want to see a little bit more detail. I think you're on the right track with the no profile. It is an improvement, but there's still a lot of options there that would change the aesthetics of it, specifically the cradle or the platform lift.
Azure, do you have a response to that?
I have no problem going with a pure platform lift if that's again what the commission would be on board with. They both will meet the applicant's needs for keeping a boat at the site and having the lift. As far as railings, we were not envisioning railings. They're more obtrusive than functional, and we weren't proposing lights on the platform, although the fixed pier component might have some lights on it, low-level lighting that focuses down, just again for safety purposes at night, but not on the lift itself.
So Andrew, I'll say the following. I couldn't agree with you more. Whatever is the least impactful visibly to everybody is what I want to do. So neutral colors, agree. If you want a platform, that's what we'll do. If you don't like railings, and Azure tells me that we don't need railings, we're not going to do railings. And any lighting is purely for safety. There's no desire to have this be something lit up for anything other than safety purposes. So whatever, I would just put it this way. You tell me whatever you'd like, and as long as Azure tells me that environment, but not having the boat hitting against the ocean floor, that's what we'll do.
On the note of not having the boat hit the ocean floor, Azure, in your memo of March 4th, number 1, you talk about the mean low water is 2.1 feet and 1.9 feet during mean low water. And you discuss that a boat which draws approximately 20 inches without the motor is likely to impact the bottom. What would be the draw on a boat with a motor? Because I don't think Mr. Gross is going to be using rows.
No, but usually motors are kept in the up position, so we wouldn't necessarily have it drawing with a motor all the time. But again, I don't.
Doesn't the motor add to the weight?
Sure, it does. Yeah.
And the depth at hitting the bottom?
No, it would. I mean, the boats are. Yeah, the weight and the ballast of the boats are equally distributed to count for the motor.
So what vessel is being planned to be moored there?
Peter, you had something in mind, right?
What I was looking at was the 23-foot Grady Way.
We provided an example of that at the last appearance.
Right. Do you have this in your possession yet?
Well, I wanted to have a dock first before I got the boat.
Smart move.
Right. But what's to say that's there's
You get to the top.
what's to say that 6 months from now, if you sell the place, that someone else wants to, if we approve this marine structure, that the next owner of the house brings in a bigger boat? How do we restrict that? So to me, either this dock is not going to have a significant environmental impact, or it is. So I don't think that we can tie the dock to a size of boat, because any boat, one of his neighbors can visit him with a big boat.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that, first of all, the reason for the boat lift was 100% to avoid impacting the bottom of the ocean. And I'll get to your point about others in a second, extremely judicious until I have proper learnings about when I'm taking that boat out. You know, I think the biggest thing that you have, Tony, and I know this might sound hard, is common sense. Because if anyone tries to put a bigger boat in there, they're just restricting the amount of times that they actually can go take the boat out, boat lift or not. So to me, you know, the reason why I stopped at 23 feet was I would have rather gone bigger, just because of the volatility of Long Island Sound that most of you on this are much more familiar with than me as a neophyte in boating. But ultimately, what's the constraint on the size of the boat is just, you can't take the darn thing out if it's any bigger than that. You're just gonna limit yourself to a tiny portion of the day.
That was going to be my second point too, because if you're out on the Sound and there's a thunderstorm and it's low tide, you're going to have to hit the bottom to get back in.
Yeah, I'm on the Grady White website, a 23-foot Grady White with the maximum 300 horsepower engine, has a hull draft of 18.5 inches. So you're going to cut it pretty close at low tide. But with respect to the aesthetics of the no profile boat lift, can we just get a picture? Can Race just provide, without getting into a complicated rendering, just some pictures of the specific, and you can get it right off the no profile website. Just show us what you want to do with a cut and paste picture from the no profile website. Is that possible?
Right now during this meeting?
No.
Oh,
No,
okay.
just
Well, I would say the following: if providing that, Andrew, is going to make a difference between doing a vote right now or not, I'd rather we do it. Is that a condition, Andrew?
Is this up for a vote tonight, Chairman?
It's up for consistency determination at tonight's meeting.
Well, if you're in front of a computer and you can show me or show us what you're talking about, I think the platform lift is something that I think is more practical and aesthetically more pleasing.
Azure, if
Aren't
it's
we also-
possible, I can promote you to a panelist and you can share your screen, but only if you can find what the request is. So let me know.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, Martin.
So my concern with this whole thing is that we're talking about optimal conditions. So if and the point was touched on slightly, but let's say you're out in your boat and it's not optimal conditions and it's low tide and you're trying to get back to your dock and you can't get in because it's low tide and maybe the water is out farther than it normally is at low tide and it's a storm brewing. Like, it sounds like there's more chances than not that you wouldn't be able to get back to your dock.
So Martin, here's my thought on this. I plan to have a relationship with a local boatyard or docking area. And if somehow I run into trouble, I'm going to count on a relationship that I will develop with a local docking place to put the dock. I also, just to be clear, I have no intention of taking that thing out if there's a weather forecast that says it's going to get rough, because I've got no business doing that. But if I ever ran into a problem, I'm not going to try and bring it back to the house. I'll make sure I've got a relationship and I'll bring it back to a place that safely, without hurting the bottom of the ocean, I can bring it back to. And that would be my intent. And that's what I plan to do.
Well, again, back to the previous comment about, well, what if you sell the house to somebody else? Are they going to be as judicious as you're going to be? Or is that something that we have to write into the, you know?
I would respect, this may be a little bit of personal philosophy. I do think that there has to be some place where you trust the common sense and good judgment and civic mindedness of people. And again, I think I don't think me being judicious is such a rare trait. I would hope that, and I think would expect that others would be the same. And again, I would be careful. It's just my point of view. I'd be careful trying to overly codify the expectation of common sense.
Right, I get that. I'm just looking at it purely as a safety issue.
Yeah.
Can I get into this one second? It's Joe Harbor
Yes.
Master. Okay, we've seen this application before us for a while now. Main concerns is, unfortunately, there's only 2.1 feet of water spotted low tide. It'll be less with an offshore breeze. With a moon tide, it'll have even less.
Hey, Joe,
Right.
can you turn your speaker off on the computer? Because it's creating a feedback loop.
How
Thank
about
you.
now?
Perfect. No, it's still happening.
How about now?
It's a little bit better.
A little bit better. Go ahead, Joe. We can hear you.
Hold on one second. Okay. Unfortunately, there's only 2.1 feet of low tide at the location at the dock. There'll be less water. If we had an offshore breeze or something with a moon tide, we'll have even less. Andrew's right. Most 23-foot boats without a motor draw between 18 and 20 inches. The DEC and other agencies say they require 2.5 clearance from under the float to the mud line. Now, if we add a boat onto that, really the stops on the dock would have to be around 4.3, and also on the boat lift, so he comes in, it doesn't interfere with the mud line or what's underneath the boat. The no profile dock, the pictures are great that they provided with us. If you notice in all those no profile pictures they gave us, there's no piles on those docks. They visually look beautiful, not what is in their present plan that they've got before us. They all have plenty of water underneath them. Most of those profile docks are located or hooked up to a fixed pier system. Some are hooked up to a floating dock, but they have plenty of water underneath that to support that. As far as the aesthetics goes, in the pamphlet that they gave us, the aesthetics, there's a few there that shows don't settle for less. There's one that says it's ugly and obstructive. Their plan that they're giving for us with a floating dock, an 8x20 dock, 4 piles next to it with a boat lift is exactly what they showed us that we shouldn't be having. I'm all for a no profile dock, but the whole plans would have to be redone. They would have to have a fixed pier there to show us something different than what's there now. I'd like to see Mr. Gross have a boat there. Unfortunately, because of the water depth there, and this is just my opinion, I would love to see the pier, a gangway. Why not think of a 20 by 30 dock at the bottom with a built-in ramp that he could get a little Zodiac up and down? That would entitle him to have a bigger boat in the mooring field, and at certain times he could bring that boat to his house. So he would have a mooring very close to his property. He'd have a dock there that he could use a Zodiac at any time to get it up if it stays at 2.5 feet off the bottom. And on a nice day, if he had a bigger boat, he could certainly tie it up to his dock now. But with an 8x20 dock that they have in their application now, I'd like to know how Mr. Gross is going to tie a 20-foot boat up to that dock to get it into the boat lift. If he goes on the 20-foot side of the dock, that's 5 feet over the property line of his neighbor. A 20 by 30 foot dock, at least you could maneuver the boat to get it in. Try to put a boat on a boat lift in the outer harbor with a southwest wind about 15-20, good luck. Most of the boat lifts are located inside harbors where the water's calm and it's a little bit more easy to, move the boat in and out of the position. I think it's just my opinion, there's other alternatives that may be beneficial for Mr. Gross instead of going through this project of the gangway, the pier, a boat lift next to it. But actually what they presented to us on their application that I don't think has changed since it's been in, 8x20 dock, that's right on those pages, 4 piles next to it with a boat lift. That's exactly the pictures that they provided us that are so ugly and obtrusive that they have now. So if we're gonna go forward with a no profile lift, you also have to remember, if they wanna go by the rules, the 2.5 feet from the bottom line, from the mud line, plus the boat without a motor, another 20 inches, brings the stops on the dock to 4.3 and the boat lift at 4.3. These are just things to consider.
Can I respond to that? And then Azure, I'd like you to respond after. Joe, I just want you to know, every time you've had comments, I've spent a tremendous amount of personal time talking to the DEC. And I want you to know, I've tried really hard. You had mentioned once about building the dock out another 30 feet. And the DEC told me that was going to hurt the environment a lot more than the boat lift I was planning. You talked about the dredging. I took that to the DEC. I spent 2 hours on the phone with the DEC going back and forth over dredging. And they told me that would be more injurious to the environment than this boat lift. So I've been trying to navigate between every utterance that's been made and trying to see and explore it all in good faith. And I haven't been told anything better than the plan. If I went to a bigger boat than a 23-foot boat, which I fully recognize, there's going to be periods of low tide or conditions where I'm not going to take that thing out. And to Martin's good point, if I was ever out and somehow managed to get out mistakenly and conditions got worse, I wouldn't bring it back to the house. If I got a bigger boat than a 23-foot boat, I would look to moor that off the coast. But what I've been told by the DEC countless times is that this is the best way to avoid damage to the environment. Now, Azure, would you respond to anything else that was in the Harbor Master's comment?
Yeah, no, I concur with Peter 100%. We've reached out to DEC. The 8x20 floating dock is the largest that they will approve. And again, the boat lift has been considered environmentally acceptable from both DEC as well as the village's own consultants, Van Hoger, to minimize impacts. You mentioned, the 2.5-foot clearance. And so that's how the floating dock needs to be chalked so it doesn't touch the bottom. It doesn't mean that a boat coming off the lift cannot be ever any closer than 2.5 feet. The 2.5 feet is just to prohibit constant bottom impacts from a float. So you mentioned 4 feet of water depth, which would be required, to meet the 2.5-foot clearance, and that's just not what DEC intended, for the 2.5-foot clearance. That's really only just for the float.
Azure, I have a question for you.
Yes.
How does this proposal meet our harbor management plan?
I don't know how it doesn't. What specific policies in your harbor management plan does it not meet?
We provided a response in our March 4th submission, which specifically addressed the harbor management plan. And the issue.
Which exhibit is it?
It's in the narrative on page 3 at the bottom, where the policy 6 specifically deals with marine structures in the village and states that marine structures within the village shall conform to sound guidelines as to construction, design, use, and configuration. Likewise, the installation, maintenance, and mooring devices shall be regulated as to ensure the safety and sound utilization of available waters, which this proposal does. And further, policy 6 says the placement of marine structures and moorings shall be such that proper recognition is accorded to the rights of upland owners and their neighbors, and such that public waters are used for the public good. There's nothing that's being proposed that is inconsistent with either of those comments in policy 6 of the harbor management plan.
So you're telling me that you've met all the procedural requirements that are in the harbor management plan?
I believe we have, I believe that particularly as it relates to policy 6 is going to the issue that's being raised right now, which I just alluded to and we went through in our submission.
Policies are one thing, but the requirements are another.
Or are you looking at a specific procedural requirement in the harbor management plan?
I have to go to my shelf in the other room and grab it. I'll be back.
David had a comment. David, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a couple of quick comments. I would think that the discussion about the size of the dock and the lift, sorry, there's tremendous feedback here.
Yeah, actually, that is Doreen. If you could please lower your computer volume, because it's creating a feedback loop.
Yeah, because I go in and out. So I wonder, is not with regard to the size of the dock, the size of the vessel, it would seem to me they should be
I'm just gonna
limited.
mute you for a moment.
I'm sorry, I'll wait.
Sorry, I just muted Doreen. I will not keep you muted. I'll just wait for David to make his comment.
Go ahead, David.
Okay, fine. I said, I would say to me that, I'm not sure how this has been done in the past with others, but it would seem to me that the size of the dock, the size of the dimensions, the maximum size of the vessel are items that everybody seems to be discussing, but they ought to be in a final, if we're going to do a consistency in a resolution that would indicate that. I think that it's the good faith that the applicant is acknowledged and no one questions that. But we also have a duty, I think, to say, okay, this is not going to be for a lot different size boat. I also think similarly a question on the lights. I think the specifications on the lights are very important. I don't know if planning does that or we do that. I don't know, but that becomes very important, particularly with the way the lights could be intrusive to others. And finally, I'll just throw everything on the table with everybody. I'm confused on something. I was reading about there not being a problem under the plans with regard to certain policies of the village or the state. But I think there's been a conflating of the zoning issue. I don't see, and I've checked other jurisdictions and they all seem to treat them differently. But from a residential standpoint, a dock is one thing and a lift is something different. And I don't know if it's, we don't make the zoning determination, but I think I'm just questioning whether I don't see any provision that allows in a residential area a lift for boats. That's much more commercial, and that's why there aren't many. There's one apparently. I don't know how that was varianced or grandfathered or what it was, but
no. But
I mean, I just say we're taking. To me, I see the dock. I'll finish up. I see the dock as one thing. I think basically that's an accessory use. It's been classified, but it's subject to. It's not as of right. But I don't see any place where it talks about a lift, and a dock and a lift are two different items. And I don't see any permission. I don't see any zoning provision here that says you can use property in a residential area for a zoning lift, for a lift. I don't see that.
What the code says is the code says facilities for residents to dock, moor, and or launch boats. And if there's any ambiguity in the code, it must be weighed in favor of the applicant and against the regulating body.
Mm-hmm. Right. But still says for doing what again? For launching boats? It's a dock.
Residents to dock, moor, and or launch boats.
Right. That's not a lift. I understand it. One could say I bring a helicopter in to launch my boat. I don't think a helicopter pad would be part of it. I'm just raising. I don't see anything in the code. I'm just expressing it. I spent some time on zoning, about 20 years there, but I think that it's, I don't know where it provides. I'll defer to you, but I think if it doesn't, here's my question then, Mr. Chair. If it doesn't comply, is that a requirement for consistency, or does that then just go and take its route? If they need to go to zoning, they go to zoning.
Well, there's not, and I would further add is that the building inspector did not identify that what's being proposed is inconsistent or prohibited, which is the controlling. He's the interpreter of the code.
He may very well be in the first instance. I mean, that's very possible.
I think the operating principle here is that zoning may guide what we do, but we don't do zoning. Is Christy, am I wrong about that? Or am I right about that?
I'm sorry.
And then if I could just add one further thing.
But Mr. Chair, if I could, excuse me, Mr. Chair, I have a question. I understand that we don't have that. As a general question, if something does not comply with zoning, does that have anything to do with us, or do we simply say, well, it's subject to whatever requirements exist elsewhere?
Mr. Chairman, may I just add one thing, please?
You can, but I'm going to answer his question.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
If it forms a part of the factors that you deliberate in coming to a determination about consistency on any one of the 44, then it's something that you can consider. And if it doesn't, you can't.
Thank you.
I would also add that a marine structure is defined as any structure, including but not limited to jetties, groins, breakwaters, bulkheads, floats, piers, boathouses, moorings, and/or docks in or upon the waters of the under the waterlands of the village of Mamaroneck. So it's a pretty broad definition.
Doesn't include lifts.
It says
It
any
didn't say
structure,
limited to.
including but not limited to.
Yeah.
Are there any limitations in your scenario then?
There may be,
No,
but
Jeffrey, is there any limitation?
Doesn't include a lift.
I'm sorry?
There may be, but it certainly doesn't include a lift.
David, for what it's worth, David, for what it's worth, you know, at just having exhaustive conversations with the DEC, for what it's worth, what's so fascinating to me, I so respect everybody's involvement in the discussion and the level of and intensity of the deliberation. What's so fascinating is the tenor of the discussions I've had with the DEC, where everything I've said to them is, how do we protect the environment, be thoughtful while giving access to the water? And their view in every time I've had a discussion with them is incredible focus on getting that boat lift in there as a very thoughtful and measured response to the circumstances that I have while giving me access to the water. They've actually viewed the boat lift. What's interesting about the question, they've always viewed it as part of an ecosystem that gives me access to the water, but accomplishes what I've told them I want to accomplish, which is to try and be really mindful of the universe that lurks underneath. So I guess my only point would just be, I've always viewed it as part of the same because I've tried to be very environmentally conscious. Just to have the dock there without the lift, in my mind, as a custodian of that property in that area, and I own the water rights underneath it, I'm trying to be a good custodian. So to me, I view them as inextricably tied because it's part of the same thing, which is recreation, but mindful and thoughtful recognition of the environment as part of that recreation. So I just want to tell you that's the spirit of how I approach it.
Okay, at this point, I do have oh, go ahead, Doreen, you had fetched something and you wanted to talk about,
Right.
answer our question about the procedural steps in the harbor management plan. Go ahead.
Mr. Gross, all due respect, we appreciate you being environmentally sensitive. However, the DEC issued you a permit which says that you cannot move forward until a local permit is issued.
Oh, I'm very well aware of that.
So, Mr. Russo explained part of what's required for marine structures, docking facilities. I ask you and your representatives to go to Volume 1 of our Harbor Management Plan, starting on page 43. It tells you what's required and what our local review criteria is. So there's a lot of information still missing. And Mr. Russo gave a basic explanation of the minimum requirements from the get-go.
Tony, do you want to
How are you
respond?
meeting that?
I don't have the harbor management plan in front of me right now, but you know, we did review it. We did address what we believe to be the relevant portions as it relates to the questions that came up. And I don't know what Ms. Rhodey is pointing to right now, except for the volume that's
At the
there.
last meeting, I said, look at the Harbor Management Plan, Volume 1, for the building application review criteria, private moorings in the village. Look at Appendix G. There's much information in our harbor management plan that's required. However, we don't have information from you on it.
What does it call for that we don't have?
Yeah.
What section are you referring to?
The method and manner of construction, site-specific variables, design specifications and guidelines, layout and design guidelines for small craft birthing facilities, state of California, 1984 is a standard. The National Fire Protection Association,
Doreen,
NFPA 303. I mean, all you have to do is look at this and look at our materials, and we're missing a lot.
Doreen, if I may, this is Hernani. Volume 1 only has 21 pages. I think you're looking at volume 2.
No, I'm definitely looking at volume.
Yeah, it's 21 pages.
Hang on a second. Yeah, it's 1. Don't have such good lighting here. So it's volume 2, page 43 it starts with. And it's the
Chairman.
final report.
Chairman Burt.
Just a minute, I'm gonna look for page 43, you said?
Starts on page 43. Procedure for private development. Excuse me.
Building application review criteria.
Local review criteria. I can go on with everything.
Well, except that some of those things we have a fair amount of information, though we don't have the final, as Andrew pointed out earlier, we don't have the final boat lift, which was something we addressed at the top of this meeting. But we do have, I think, the specifications for all of the rest of the marine structures that are planned, right?
But we don't have the, am I correct that we don't have the ones for the dock? Or for the lift?
For the dock, but not the lift. We don't have final specs on the lift because we've been offered essentially a series of alternatives. And as Andrew said earlier, it could be that to have a vote, we have to nail that down to model.
Can I? Yeah, sorry, Jim.
Can I interject for a second? There's a very good video on YouTube that shows the no profile boat lift, and it shows a picture of a conventional boat lift. It's 2 minutes long. You don't have to watch the whole thing, but can Greg put that up and share it with everyone? If I give you what to search for on YouTube?
Do we have to do it at this meeting now when we haven't had a decision as to what the final is going to be?
I'm stipulating as an applicant the following. If as whatever Andrew wants that boat lift to be, as long as Andrew, you tell me it's going to accomplish it, I'm agreeing with whatever the hell Andrew wants that boat lift to be, and I'm fine with it.
No, Peter, Mr. Gross, I appreciate the deference, but I can't tell you what to do there.
And can I just interject? This is Azure. I mean, does the commission, and Tony, maybe you can, Tony Joffrey, weigh in on this? I mean, we're talking about a very specific model. Is that something you have the purview to dictate? I mean, we're talking about final specifications. I kind of liken this to the building department issues a permit for a garage. They don't issue a permit for the type of car or vehicle that is going to be stored at that garage.
No, but
I'm not telling you. Let me be clear. I'm not telling you what model to use. I'm talking about aesthetics. I'm talking about consistency. The original boat lift I didn't like. You came up with an alternative called the no profile boat lift, which I happen to think is a 180 degrees in a different direction. And I just want everyone on the commission to know exactly what this is, because I don't know if they've looked at all these websites and videos that I did today. This 2-minute video would be helpful.
Well,
so these people know what we're looking at.
Well, okay. Hang on a second. Hang on a second, because I want to address what Ms. Schleicher asked, which is we're weighing in on a marine structures permit. We do consistency, but we also do the marine structures permitting, and the heart, as Doreen points out correctly, there are procedural requirements for a civil dock that say things like final specifications. So when we say things like we would like to know the final specifications of the boat lift, we're not making that up because we feel like asking it. We're trying to round out a complete set of information necessary under the procedural requirements we live with. You know, I think I know a fair amount about what it is you're applying for here, but Doreen said, let me go get the harbor management plan. There are certain things procedurally that we're supposed to know. One of them is final specifications. She's not wrong that we don't know the final specs on the boat lift. We're not saying we want that because we want to be difficult. We're saying we want that because it's been pointed out that we're supposed to have final specifications on everything before we make a determination.
Also, a
Here, I have
marine
But Mr. Burke,
engineer can help us understand this, a consultant, as well as the fire protection, because electricity has to get to that dock, or that lift, excuse me. There are no plans for that.
so Commissioner
Mr. Chair, I
Burke,
have a question, if I may.
I'm sorry, somebody else is trying to get my attention.
yeah, Tony Gilbert.
Go ahead, Tony.
I want to go back to almost the start of this application, or even before we had an application, and that this harbor coastal plan is supposed to be the 500-foot level. And so, to me, our responsibility to the environment is critical. And I understand that Mr. Gross is really concerned with it. But with respect to the dock and the boat, we have to give them access to the water. And Joe Russo has some problems with this. To me, our responsibility is that if we give them a duck walk and Joe gives them a mooring, they can put a boat in the water. And so either the fact that that alternative is out there, I think if any boat won't fit in there, it's not in our purview to say that they can put a boat there. So I'm just going back to that 500-foot level, that we have to give them access to the water, not a boat lift, not a dock, none of that stuff.
All right, I understand your comment. David, you were trying to say something.
Yeah, I had a question on, I concur, obviously, that we need the specs and everything. And in terms of the size, the manufacturer, that's not the issue. It's the specifications. You can base it on one. But I had a question. Somebody, I think it was the harbor, somebody earlier brought up, and I'm sorry because the sound goes in and out from me here. But the question about the pilings and the way it would look, I don't think there was a response to that. There was a concern that it would look like one of the pictures, which was depicted as being an example of what you don't want. And they were saying if you put the piles on the side of them, they're going to look like one of the pictures that don't. I'm not sure. Somebody could address that. Will it not look like that under the aesthetics pictures?
I think if they go with a no profile dock, the whole pier has to be redesigned. All the no pier docks now, all fixed to a fixed pier or floating dock, which has enough water underneath it to submerge that section of the dock to get the boat out of the water. The pictures they showed that I brought up is exactly what they gave us on the print right now. It's basically an 8x20 dock at the bottom with 4 piles next to it with a boat that would be lifted up and suspended in midair at low tide. So I think we got to agree that if we're going to go forward with a no profile, we got to remember too the 2.5.
Right.
Plus, after the boat really makes all the stops stop at around 4.3 on mud bottoms. So that's kind of cutting some time off the use of the boat during the tide cycle. I would love to find out why DEC or Army Corps wouldn't allow a bigger dock at the bottom of that gangway. Would give Mr. Gross more access all around. It could stay at 2.5. They build docks with an incline that you could bring a Zodiac up on or whatever, and you could have a nicer boat out of the mooring fields, and he gets to utilize the dock at right parts of the tide. He could bring the bigger boat over there, enjoy it for the day, maybe use the whole day with the right tide on it. But I think to stick with here is if they go with a no profile, the application, the way it's given now with a gangway, a dock, and basically 8 piles at the bottom of it, which looks like a cluster, isn't going to work. It has to be redesigned and have a different print layout.
If I could just follow that, could you explain to me how the piles work on the no profile?
Yeah, again, can we show that video? Can we just, I sent Greg everything he needs to get it up. can we agree to show that video, watch it for a minute and a half? It'll be very, very helpful.
So is this the company that manufactures the product that was proposed in the March 5 submission?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, well then it's not inappropriate. Let's play it. If you can do that, Greg, let's play it.
I can do that. Give me one moment.
Thank you.
And Azure, at
While
some
he's
point,
doing that, Mr. Chairman, if I could just add that I just went on the Harbor Hoist website. The specifications, when you click on specifications, it's the first 2 pages of what we submitted in our Exhibit A right after Ms. Fleischer's letter. And those are the specifications that they provided. And I'd further add that at our last appearance, when I asked pointedly at the end of the last meeting, if there was any additional materials that the commission was looking for, please let us know. And we were told twice that no additional materials were required.
Okay, Mr. Joffrey, does at Appendix A, the second page of the Harbor Hoist materials, are you?
The first and second page is what comes up on their website when you click specifications.
Okay.
Wait, Harbor Hoist is not what we're proposing. Harbor Hoist was one that was one of the floating submersible ones that wouldn't work at this site.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, it's not. Is there one? Which is the one then? If you could direct us.
Please play the video. We're getting off topic here and it's getting confusing.
Well, no, it is on topic. She's saying it's not that one.
I know. I
No,
didn't say
the
that.
one,
I said
no, the one that
profiles.
Andrew
I
wants to show is right.
Here it is. Here it is.
This right?
Look at it. Yes, that's correct. Play the video, please. Play it. And then you'll see a picture of the former proposed. I like this look, I think is aesthetically pleasing. No railings, no lights,
No piles.
no piles.
Well, the piles are underneath it. That's what holds it up, right?
Right.
What's
Right.
the size of the platform?
What happened, Greg? Is it playing?
It should be
Fine.
playing.
It is.
I'm
It
watching
is
it.
playing.
Yeah.
Okay. Mine's
So what's
playing
the
very
size of the
slowly.
hoist on the lift or the platform?
It has to be designed according to the boat that the applicant would like.
Okay. I like
Okay,
this.
so
look
you're
of
telling
it.
me that we don't have final specifications.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay, that's clear at least.
Now, I have a question. How high above the water level, for high tide and low tide, does that fixed dock?
The
The wheels
fixed
up.
dock,
Yeah, that's a fixed dock on piles, correct?
the span, the main span that leads out to the float and to the boat lift is, yes, is a fixed dock.
Right, and I'm asking, and I noticed obviously that it's not, it's above the water, which it has to be.
Mhm.
So what I'm trying to understand is at low tide, how high is it going to be above the water, and at high tide, how high?
The top of deck elevation is plus 8.9, so
I'm sorry.
above,
I'm sorry, once again, there's sounds coming across here like a boing. I have no idea who's doing it or what.
Okay, hold on. Here's the old boat lift. If you look now, that's a picture of a traditional boat lift with the piling and the boat hanging there.
I understand.
Do you see this now?
I do, of course, yes.
This is what we're trying to avoid.
Right. And my question was when,
Versus this one.
right, so my question was, how high is that platform above the water at high tide and low tide?
I would say at least 12 feet.
It's supposed to be 6 feet above high water.
So you got an
That's
8-foot
standard.
tide.
right,
You got 6 feet above high water, and what about low tide?
Low
About
tide is
12.
8 feet. Difference between high and low is 8 feet. So 8 plus 6 is 14.
So then it would be 14 feet. 14 feet, okay. And have there been any studies done on,
12 feet. It'd be 12 feet above the low water and about 5.5 feet above the mean high.
five and a half above high?
The other thing that we haven't considered
Just one thing.
that we have previously with marine structures like this is the shading of what is living underneath the water.
The same as would be if a boat was there.
The same as a boat?
Well, a boat is going to cast a shadow similar to the platform. The platform might cast obviously a little bit more.
Yes, I would think, basically, since it would be much larger, I would think. But
Christie,
I have
okay.
a question. Has anyone done any study on what happens when you get a storm and how high the water goes up? And we've had storms, et cetera, over the years.
15 feet. It's a VE zone. So the waves are 15 feet. Go
During
up to
a 100-year storm, yes, that's the possibility as mapped by FEMA. And as we previously indicated, the applicant would remove his boat in a pending storm, put it on a mooring or otherwise get it off the lift.
And what would happen to the dock? And it's electric. It would just, it can sustain that being underwater?
Probably not for prolonged periods of time, but everything is in watertight housing. It's appropriate for the marine environment and saltwater exposure.
Okay. Christie, I need the advice of counsel on a procedural point. Without the applicant's consent.
You want to do this? Sorry, do you want to do this?
No, this is not an executive session question. This is an open session advice of counsel.
Questions. Okay.
Without asking the applicant's permission, if I were to determine as chair that we had sufficient evidence, a sufficient evidentiary record for the commissioners cast a vote on the consistency of the wetlands permit portion of the application, but not on the matters that require a marine structures permit, could I, as chair, move to sever them and vote separately?
I don't see why not.
We are in the unusual situation where we've got an applicant who has moved a fair way forward on 2 emergency permits. One does not, sort of by operation of logic, get to choose when an emergency arises. So since the applicant is moving forward with work both on the house and on the seawall on emergency permits and has no choice but to do so, because that's the nature of an emergency permit, the applicant is now very far in time and cost into a project. We are here with some fairly extensive discussions that are almost entirely the last 2 meetings about matters that relate only to the marine structures aspects. Some of the commissioners on this commission continue to have questions, and there is a serious procedural question about whether we have all the information that our harbor management plan requires us to have a final consistency determination on the marine structures permit. We now are faced with the unpalatable choice of either potentially holding up work on a large project that's going forward, parts of which we know we can make our determination about whether they can proceed, or of potentially holding everything up because we're unable to determine the marine structures part of it. So I'm going to go, even though we have offered this to the applicant before, having been advised by counsel that I'm able to do it, I'm going to make a motion now to separately consider all of the portions of this application for consistency that do not require a marine structures permit.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
You can.
So are you suggesting to separate that portion of the application so that we can continue with the boat lift separately as we move forward to provide that information?
Yeah, I'm saying that I don't want to call a vote prematurely when I'm hearing loud and clear from commissioners that as to and only as to the marine structures aspects of this, there are some people on the commission that think there's information outstanding. I understand you've tried to close it out and say, what else do you need? Things come up. And I'm hearing right now that we have commissioners that don't think they can make a consistency vote. You've made it real clear. And I understand that your applicant needs to move forward with the House portion of this. I got it. The way I'm going to handle it, because I now think that I can and should, is to bring this to a consistency vote on the House.
Everything except for this boat lift.
That's not what I said. Just to be real clear again, I'm going to make a motion, and I expect I'll get a second on it. I'm going to make a motion that, because it's the natural way to split it, that we determine consistency on the portions of the application that do not require a marine structures permit. Now, I think everybody's been very clear, Mr. Joffrey, that that the questions are very boat lift focused on the marine structures permit portion, but the natural split in the application, and you can't split it because that would be sequencing, but we can because we're the commission. The natural split is between the parts of this that require a wetlands permit that are on the land and the parts of this that require a marine structures permit that are not on the land.
Understood. And then we would come back to you potentially next month for the marine structures permit portion of the application.
As quickly and expeditiously as possible so that we can all close this out one way or another, yes. So so everybody's got my motion. My motion is to split the wetlands part from the marine structures part and reach a consistency determination at this meeting on the wetlands part. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chair, I don't think the consistency manual allows us to do that.
Mr. Chair, if I may, there's an alternative. I think I'm in agreement, but I think there's an alternative. You could just have a vote on the whole thing where in the motion, it would just be not to sever, but to deny that without prejudice to it continuing.
That I actually don't, David, I got it. I actually don't think we should do. I'm not sure if we can do that. I actually don't think that we should. So I understand that if my motion fails, you are welcome to propose that one instead. But my motion is that we split the two and reach a determination on the wetlands portion permit. That is the part that's on the land, that we do so now.
And would that be with the understanding?
I second that.
Would that be with the understanding we get the specifications and the plans that we've asked for, et cetera? On the dock?
Yes.
Okay.
We're not going right. The reason that we're splitting them up is so that we don't have commissioners voting on something where they've made it clear that they don't think that the application, that they have enough information in front of them.
Right.
Commissioner Hain. Vote.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Rourke.
I'll vote aye.
Vice Chair Maggio.
Aye.
Commissioner Neufeld.
Aye.
Commissioner Roney.
No.
Commissioner Gelber.
I have a problem with that geothermal on the house. You want to break it up? Yes.
Is that a yes or a no?
That's a yes.
That's a yes to the vote to split the application. Okay. I think we've had some fairly extensive discussion at this point on the portions of this application that are not marine structures permit. Unless anybody thinks that we can't call a vote, look, I'm not prejudging how the vote goes. We're all independent commissioners with our own vote. But is there anybody that thinks they don't have enough information to vote on the non-marine structures portion of this application now?
Mr. Chair, was this be with the understanding that the agreements on where it would be located in the geotherm would be as they've indicated in
that is now part of the record. Yes, David, that is now part of the record. They said they will do it, and that's on the record.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And Commissioner Burke, this is the house only, not the seawall.
Seawalls. Go ahead, Andrew.
No, yeah. From my understanding, this is everything: house, seawall, everything except the marine structure.
Seawall doesn't require marine structures. This is everything that doesn't require a marine structure permit.
Right.
What about the boat lift at the gazebo?
Oh, the kayak launch?
Yes.
I hadn't considered that. Christy, is a Greg? I'm sorry, that's a Greg question. Is that a marine structure?
I'd have to check.
I don't think it is. I don't think it is. Okay, so let's finish that issue. Tony, obviously, this is an issue you're focused on. You go ahead and ask anything you need to know which way you're going to vote on the gazebo.
So if the seawall is in and the gazebo is in, then I would say that policy 23 also on the house, and I know Mr. Gross has done a lot of conservation and restoration work, but to me, the consistency decision our consistency decision, we would have to include some monitoring of the historic preservation of the gazebo, the wall, and the house. As far as the kayak dock goes, I think that's a critical environmental area. So I couldn't vote for consistency.
It appears that it may be a marine structure. It states that any structure, and then I'll paraphrase, upon any waters. It's 240-3, its definition of marine structure. Any structure including but not limited to jetties, groins, breakwaters, bulkheads, floats, piers, boathouses, moorings, and or docks in or upon any waters or underwater lands within the Village of Amerenik.
Okay, then that falls within marine structure, so that is not up for tonight. Gazebo is out. The rest of it we're going to vote on as a split application.
I have one
I thought
more
you were talking
question,
about the
Thomas.
kayak.
You can ask the kayak lift is part of is a marine structure that issue is being severed and dealt with separately. Commissioner Roney, you had another question. Go ahead.
We're still waiting for some kind of information from the applicant as to where the property boundary ends and the underwater lands. And
That
who
would be
owns
considered
underwater
as part of
lands.
the instructions for the kayak.
We
So
still
that
haven't
wouldn't be
received that
considered-
information.
So, Mr. Chairman, that would be, as indicated, the kayak lift, and that issue would be part of the marine structures permit, which would be separate.
Yes, just to be real clear on the record, kayak lift on the gazebo is a marine structure that we're going to consider next time.
And also, just Chair, you would have to do consistency on those items as well.
Yes, I recognize we're doing both permit and consistency on the portions that are severed.
Greg, could I ask you where that section was again? Because I'm not showing it.
It's 240-5. I'm sorry, I said 3. I was going off memory. 240-5.
All right, well, we'll work on the memory.
I'll work on it.
It's all waters in the Village of Amerenik. That makes the kayak launch also a marine structure, which means that it's by our motion severed. Okay. Time to vote. And this would be, now this is without conditions because we've gotten a commitment on the record concerning the modifications to the plan for the geothermal system. So this would be a clean consistency, but only on those parts that don't require marine structure. Gazebo's out, dockworks, boat lift, et cetera, are out. Commissioner Hayne?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Rourke?
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio?
Aye.
Commissioner Neufeld?
Aye.
Commissioner Gelber?
No.
Commissioner Roney?
No, it's not consistent with policy 23.
And put me down as an aye.
Very much, and we look forward to coming back to you with the additional information for the marine structures portion of the application.
Can I make, I got a
Okay,
question.
now,
I have a question.
go ahead.
It's Betty Ann. Today is the deadline for the April 15th meeting. Is the applicant expecting to appear at that meeting? Or are we moving to the May meeting?
We would
I have a
like to, but we
question.
don't
I have a
obviously
question
submit by
that's really
today.
important. Tony,
Yes.
I am, just a quick thing. Doreen made a comment earlier that I needed as an applicant to understand that I've got to go through the town, obviously, and everything from the DEC is subject to, I'm sorry, the village. And I just want to mention, I'm really aware of it because I'm way over $100,000 in just trying to deal with this. So I have a request, a desperate pleading to this group, which is I need to know what a complete application is, because one of the things that becomes very tough for me is it feels like, I'm not saying anything, I just want you to understand what it feels like. It feels like goalposts keep getting moved. And I desperately need to know where the end zone is to try and end this, because the hemorrhaging of cost to do this is significant. And I also want to just state for the record, I want to do, Andrew, I wasn't trying to be overly deferential. I believe you're really well intentioned. I want that boat lift to be something that everyone feels good about. So I just need to know what a complete application is so we can be done next time.
Mr. Gross, it's all in the code, and your attorney could make sure that he provides the information.
Including the plans and everything we've discussed.
Mr. Gross, to be absolutely direct with you, because I think you're entitled to that, and I hear you. I would just like to see some detailed plans of the boat lift in terms of profile, an overhead, the elevation, you know, as specific as possible, color, you know, without the railings, with the rail, whatever you want to do. That's I like your alternative. I like the no profile. It's moved me towards the boat lift. I just want to see exactly what you're going to do, and I'm a little bit confused as to the floating dock with the boat lift, how that's going to work. The last rendering, I think at this point is obsolete, factoring in this new no profile lift. So I just want to see some detail on that, some pictures, profiles, overhead. You know, what model, what colors, that type of thing. That's what I need at this point.
Okay,
Before we close. And it also sounds like we need all that for the kayak lift, kayak dock as well. Right?
And I would just add, if I could, one of the things I'd like to see is whether or not, I don't know if you need railings, if that's required from a safety standpoint or not, because I know they're not. And the height between the bottom of the dock and the water, pilings and the specs on that, and the title issues of the ownership of the rights on the property underwater. But
It's going to
that's
be
all.
important also that we decide on how much distance from the mud line going up. It's 2.5 feet is what they wanted for the bottom of the float. If we're going to add a boat on it, that's another 20 inches at least without an engine. So that's got to be incorporated into the plan also that we agree on.
Okay, so
And
Mr. Joffrey.
Just one thing before we forget. The other thing is, with this platform boat lift, does that serve at, do you need a floating dock if you have the platform boat lift? Because that platform, that moving platform becomes a de facto dock. So just you know, clarify that, please, Race.
So, and Mr. Joffrey, I'll close this out by saying, as you know, as a lawyer, you appreciate the difference between that which is substantive and that which is procedural. You've got, you know, exactly where Commissioner Roney was looking for information necessary to make out the procedural requirements of the marine structure, the harbor management plan that pertains to civil docks, Appendix G, page 40 and page 43 of volume 2 harbor management plan. Go through and make sure that, and if it's in this, some of this information has been provided and is scattered through the record as to the, and we may have it all. As to the boat lift, it is not, because since you came in for good reasons, I understand, since you came in somewhat open as to what the commission wanted for a boat lift and couldn't really have anticipated this, now you know. In order to take a final vote on it, we have a bunch of commissioners that think that we need to know what the final specs are on the boat lift. You got now a lot of understanding of what people do and don't like, do and do not think are a problem. You got to pick one, spec it, make that your application, and we can vote on it. I never want to say never. I do not imagine a circumstance where I won't feel like I've got enough information to vote on this, on the marine structures portion of this next time. I can't tell you for sure that all commissioners agree with that, but I'm telling you my intent.
Mr. Chair, there are two other items that we really need before the next meeting. One is the underwater land situation on the marine structure, on the seawall and the gazebo, as well as I provided pictures of across the mill pond, and we really need to evaluate the aesthetics on how that boat lift or whatever is put there is going to look
The vice chair
to
addressed
and
that.
from the harbor.
Right. The vice chair addressed that. We need a rendering. We need a boat lift picked, final specs. We need to make sure that you touched all the bases. The applicant has touched all the bases in the harbor management plan requirements for a civil dock, and we need the underwater land situation finally laid to rest, particularly with regard to the kayak on the gazebo. I think that is everything that we know that we need, and I've been real clear about my intent procedurally.
Can we go back to Betty Ann's question about the next meeting that they would be able to submit this by?
I don't anticipate that we'd be able to get everything today, which is your deadline, let alone by the end of this week. So I anticipate that we'd like to be back before your May meeting.
Okay, so I would suggest you continue the hearing to the May meeting.
Then that's what we're going to do. Hearing on this matter continued to the next meeting, but the consistency determination as to the non-marine structures part stands. The applicant's dismissed from this meeting. Thank you for your time, folks.
Mr. Chair, did you say May or the next meeting? I'm sorry.
May, I'm sorry, you're right. I just misspoke, David. Continued to the May meeting. Thank you for catching that, David. The applicant is dismissed. Thank you for your time, folks.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I had one.
Now, once again, we have one of these difficult procedural things. Greg, I think we are now going to hear from 139, right? 139 East Prospect.
That's correct. But give me just a moment to mute certain people and.
Right. There are 3 commissioners recusing on this, as I understand.
3.
Could we take a quick?
There's a lot of shared people here.
Can we take a quick break?
Comfort break so everyone can visit their restrooms. This is a perfect time to do that. Greg, cut off anyone who said they are recusing on this matter.
Yeah, I've been advised to recuse, Thomas.
Yeah, I have no issue with that. It is a conscientious choice. Thank you.
Yep. How will we know when to come back, Greg?
If you check your emails, I'll send you an email.
Okay.
April or May?
Yeah, like
Yeah,
what,
yeah.
am I just supposed to sit by my email for the next hour? Like that seems kind of.
That's the way.
So that's the only suggestion I have.
Have the next application as well. Can I call you tomorrow?
If you want to email me your phone number, I can text you.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay. Who was the last person?
Someone seems to have their speakers on as well.
Yeah, that's Doreen. I've been trying to mute her in between, and we asked her to lower her volume, but I don't think it worked out. All right, so we've got Carlito. Tony's already already on. Beck's getting.
And Michael.
Michael Stein.
Yeah, Michael's still on. Okay, that should be everyone. Can you all speak?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep. Rex, can you talk?
This is Michael Stein, so I'm on.
Can you hear me, Greg?
Yep.
All right.
Are you going to be sharing your screen, Rex, or is it going to be
Well, do you have the whole application package submitted?
No, so procedurally, we still need to go back to the planning board for a secret determination. We provided some additional information that was requested as a result of the last meeting. So we just wanted to provide you with an update, get some additional comments or questions, and then we'll go back to the planning board.
We're not starting yet. We're not starting yet.
We should actually go back on before we start addressing substantive stuff.
No, I was just trying to answer the question that came up. My apologies.
Yeah, fair. No, fair. Absolutely fair.
Oh, you should look at the video YouTube.
We have a hand raise.
So we have Doreen, Martin, and Andrew recused on this?
That's correct.
Doreen, Andrew, and Martin. So we still have a quorum that can sit on this. We have me, O'Rourke, Neufeld, and Gelber.
Awesome.
Chairman, may I make a totally off the record comment that has nothing to do with this evening?
No harm in that, I suppose.
So this is to Seamus. My niece just committed to Boston College.
Oh, what a smart choice.
Yeah, I was 91.
Best university in the country. And that's just a factual statement, which is why I can say it on the record. Congratulations, though. That's terrific.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm excited. I get to go. Hopefully hopefully the mods will still be there, and I'll go visit my old mod when I get up there.
Yeah, one of my cousins was a senior this year and got sent home. Obviously, that's a tough end of the year for the college kids.
Yeah, it's rough.
Okay, we have back the 4 commissioners who can sit on this matter. I think we may still be waiting for several of our professionals. So if you folks are back in the saddle, chime in and let us know when we can proceed.
Chair, I'd like to introduce you to Morty. You've been enjoying the meeting?
Is
All
Morty
house pets are
recused?
welcome additions.
I think he's amazed that I'm around all day lately. He keeps on getting very confused. He thinks it's a weekend?
got our council back.
Is that everyone?
Joe Russo, are you calling from 777? And I won't repeat the rest of the numbers, but it ends with a 52.
Yes, I am.
Okay,
You can see it on screen.
making sure that's you. Okay. Are we waiting on anyone else?
No, we're good.
No, okay, if we've got Betty Ann, we've got Christy, we've got Greg, and we've got the 4 commissioners who can sit, I think we can go ahead and proceed. Mr. Joffrey, the floor is all yours.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. At the end of the last meeting that we appeared before you with respect to this application, this commission deferred lead agency status to the planning board, so they will be lead agent for this project. There were a number of questions and requests for additional information. We did get some of the information together. There's still some information that we are working on, and we just wanted to use this opportunity to provide you with some of the more pertinent information to make it part of the record, see if there's any additional comments or questions you have at this point, using this as an exercise to find out that information, recognizing that we will go to the planning board as the next step to obtain a secret determination. And once we're through with that, come back to you. But similar to the way we ended the last application, affording us the opportunity with any thoughts you have of additional materials that you'd be requesting would be helpful for us as we prepare the next phase of materials for you. So with that, what we did provide to you was a traffic analysis. There was a number of questions that came up with respect to not only the traffic that will be generated by this proposal, but as well as emergency access for this project. We did include some information with regard to the generation of public school-age children, which under the methodologies utilized, only 1 school-age child will be generated by this project. And then we provided some additional architectural drawings depicting some of the data points that were requested, as well as a shadow study. So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to ask Carlito Holt, our traffic engineer, just to provide you the highlights of his traffic analysis for the record.
Okay, before you do that, just to keep discussion focused, if any of the commissioners knows that that they want a discussion of traffic to clear up a particular question or focus on a particular point, tell us now. That way the applicant's traffic expert can address it directly.
I don't. I think most of those questions came from a commissioner who has since recused himself too. So I think it's a good question to see if anyone does want to have that discussion.
Chairman Burt, I've walked by the place a couple of times. It's at the, there's a relatively steep hill there, and there is the kind of entrance egress from the regatta. And so, I think both from a pedestrian on the sidewalk point of view and from a car either entering or exiting either the regatta or this proposed building, I think, especially at the bottom of that hill, it could be problematic. So I would like to hear that discussion.
Okay, I think that's useful in guiding it. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I would also like some pictures and aesthetics and visual views, but I would think, can we just get some clarification? since they haven't even decided, since I guess they're now lead agency, so until they decide what they're going to do with it, because they may get additional materials as well. But this is like a preliminary discussion just to get a sense of it, correct?
Yes, that's correct. We're not voting on anything. Mr. Joffrey is before us again because he wants to upstream information to us and to know if we have any questions that he can address as early as possible. Is that right?
Do we have
Yes,
the
that's
EAF? Did they submit an EAF, and do we have one here?
I believe that was submitted as part of the first package.
Okay. Sorry. I didn't bring that over here. Okay. Mhm.
It was exhibit F of our initial submission.
Okay, so you've got some guidance from Commissioner Gelber on what the traffic questions pertain to. You can go ahead and have your traffic expert address us.
Good evening, Carlito Holt from Provident Design Engineering. We prepared a traffic analysis that we summarized in a report dated March 3rd, 2020. I'll touch upon three main conclusions drawn from the report. The first deals with the amount of traffic that would be generated by the proposed application, which would be 8 single or 1-bedroom apartment units. The existing site currently has 3 apartment units. So when you consider the rates published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, the proposed project would increase the peak hour trips during any peak hour by no more than 4 total entering and exiting trips during any peak hour. This is an extremely nominal amount and is not something that would even be noticeable to traffic traveling up and down East Prospect Avenue, and it would essentially fold into the fabric of traffic that is there today. One of the other items that we took a look at was site distance. You do have a sharp curve coming around East Prospect Avenue where the access is. The benefit of the access to this site is that it's on the outside of that horizontal curve. So you have clear sight lines looking down East Prospect Avenue towards Tompkins, as well as up East Prospect Avenue towards Mamaroneck Avenue. And we considered the standards in the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials for sightline criteria. And we meet the minimum sightline criteria looking in both directions from the site driveway. The third item that I think was brought up at one of the last meetings dealt with emergency access, both to the proposed structure or building, as well as maintaining access to the regatta building via the access that exists just to the south of the proposed building. So the fire access code requires a 150-foot minimum distance from where emergency access vehicles would be accessing the facility to any point in the building. The proposed building is 86 feet long from the frontage back to the back of the building. So a fire emergency access can be provided directly from East Prospect Avenue for the proposed building. The access for the regatta building is not being impacted in any way by the proposed project. So any emergency access that exists today for that other access adjacent would remain as is, and this application will have no impact upon that. With respect to pedestrian access, one thing that obviously would be of concern is if a car was coming in and out of the garage, but the garage is set back enough that there is clear sight line for pedestrians that would be using the sidewalk on that side. And it's such a low volume of traffic that the increase of incidents with vehicular and pedestrian traffic, again, is very nominal, and this would not have any significant incremental impact upon that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions?
No.
Okay, if there are no questions, if Mr. Gedney can just walk you through some of the data points that we provided in the architectural drawings, that would be helpful.
Chair, if I could, I do have a quick question. In what way are we tying traffic into the LWRP? I just want to make sure that I understand. How it was connected.
I'm sorry?
So my question was, so we're talking about traffic, and I just want to make sure that we're tying traffic back to the LWRP. So I was curious what the connection was. I think I may have missed it.
So there's just general safety of people, and that is safety is one of our criteria in general. The other, which I didn't make specific there, is that when the Mamaroneck River floods, how are people going to get out of that building?
Okay.
And I didn't ask that, but I should have asked that.
Well, so I mean, that's a little different question. As long as we've got the personnel here, let's deal with this. That's a little different question than the typical measurements of peak trips, right? Peak trips is typically not something we do, as it's not obvious how it directly impacts any of our policies, but flooding and emergency safety certainly is. What happened? What would have to, under what storm condition would exit from the building by car become impossible for a resident, so that if you start thinking I should get my car out of here, it's too late? And under what circumstances would foot traffic no longer be able to exit the building? If you know, and Mr. Holt, maybe you're the wrong person for that. But as long as we're talking about cars entering and exiting the building and traffic, we might as well try.
I guess I would defer to Mike Stein on whether he knows what the flood levels would be. But I guess the one thing I would add is when you're looking at that, it's an existing 3-unit building and now going in 8-unit building, access is essentially the same. From a capacity aspect, it's really no difference than how it would occur today.
And this is Michael Stein, Hudson Engineering. Only the rear of the property is any portion of in the flood zone, just looking at the flood maps. So access in and out of the site, there wouldn't be any problems at all. It's going to be unaffected. Similar to the property across the street, 172 East Prospect, where we went to a very similar study.
What year flood was that, Michael?
This is the Zone AE flood zone. That's all the way in the rear of the property, but the Zone X, that's where this falls into.
But on the what, is it at the 100-year flood, the 500-year flood?
Actually, give me 1 second. I'll bring it right up in County GIS.
And Mr. Chairman, this is exactly the type of questioning that we're looking for, so that to the extent we can't provide a full response this evening, when we come back to you, I'm sure it's something the planning board may ask as well, but we can, you're looking at it from a different perspective that we can address. I do agree with Ms. Mason that the majority of the LWRP is irrelevant for traffic.
I may make a comment that's not related to consistency, but just information for the applicant. The school enrollment numbers that you provided, the village has done a more sophisticated model during the PLLC research, so the moratorium research. And I would suggest that you update your enrollment numbers using that model. I don't think it will actually change the outcome, but it's more accurate.
We will certainly do that. Thank you.
Okay, so that is probably even farther from directly relevant to what we have to rule on for consistency.
And so,
but useful for the applicant.
My apologies. I'm not to interrupt. I have the answer. So it's probably about 3/4 of the way through or 2/3 of the way into the property is in the 100-year flood zone, and that's where the limit is.
So, Michael, you're saying that in the 100-year flood, that property, the access and egress to and from that property would not be affected?
Correct. It's only the rear third that actually falls within that 100-year floodplain. once you get up to East Prospect and the driveway and exit or entrance and exit onto East Prospect, it's completely outside of that zone.
Mike, you have the ability to share your screen, just so you know. I've left you as a panelist.
Yes, I can. And just give me 1 second and I'll get right there.
Greg, while he's trying to get that, when we look at sea level rises, and I know you've done some projections on them, does that change the levels on that 100-year flood in this area at all?
I don't know, but I can check right now.
And just to address that point as well, sheet T103 of the drawings demonstrates the access that could be out to Prospect.
So not sure if you're seeing my screen yet.
Yes.
Here's the property. The orange area is the 100-year floodplain. So there's nothing obstructed onto Prospect Avenue by far.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Greg,
So-
you're looking up the change over with the flood, with the sea level rise projections?
Yep, I am sharing my screen.
I will add, as difficult as this is doing this, being able to bring things up like this, I think is very helpful.
So this is 36 inches. I can't zoom in any further, but this is the site right here. And this is at 48 inches. I can share the
Greg, that's in what environment? Is that the 100-year flood with that amount of sea rise?
yeah. So this is the 100-year flood. This hold on, let me make sure I've got my. That's the selected scenario. So this would be the new 100-year flood. This line here. So this is their property here, and this is the entrance, and this is 48 inches of sea level rise. And I was just gonna pull up the regulations so you can get an idea of what the projections are for each of these things. So we would be Lower Hudson region. So the median projection for 2100 is 36 inches. So that's, 80 years out at 36 inches. This is the site. Only the back portion would be in a floodplain based on the median projection.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Greg. So, Mr. Chairman, at this point, I'll turn the virtual floor over to Mr. Gedney.
Good evening, everyone. As part of the supplement, I think it was Exhibit C, we actually had the surveyor come back and do a lot more survey work, getting data points and elevations, particularly along and behind with the regatta. And as part of our submission, we took those data points and implemented them and did solar studies. We submitted that as part of the package, which indicated the 4 seasons and periods of the day, which represented that actually the shadows, our building was really casting no shadows, a 3-story building with a 7-story building, which was actually located to the south and east. So that study shows that. I'm sure you've all seen that. So the other information and the survey was included, picked up a lot more site information, as you were just alluding to. The elevations out the front of the building along East Prospect range from roughly elevation 20 down to the driveway at about elevation 18 or 17 and a half. So it's fairly substantial. There's plenty, there is access there even under most extreme flood conditions. So as far as the data points, again, most of them were elevational points that we asked the surveyors to get so we could implement the shade studies, which we did submit to you.
And again, I think much of the information that we did provide and prepare will be more relevant to the planning board, but there were issues and questions that came up before your commission, and just wanted to identify if there's any additional comments, questions you have, particularly as it relates to the consistency determination that we'll be looking for from you.
Well, I certainly can't fault you for trying to get us a bunch of information early and see if we have questions as early as you can. That's the right move. I don't know right now of anything specific I know to ask you for. Other commissioners?
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. And I'd like to go over just the stormwater again, but as far as kind of, and I know light and air is not part of our bailiwick here, but there were a lot of comments from the public. So are we gonna give the public a chance to comment tonight, Chairman? Not saying that we should or should not. I'm just asking that question. And I would like to just, light and air are environmental factors that humans need. And so I know this is a stretch, Christy, but I don't even know how to ask the question. So I don't know, David, can you help me on this? Do we have any purview on light and air? Because from what some of the public said at the last meeting, people on the lower levels would have, it looks like there would be some negative effect on their light and air.
Yeah, you're speaking to me, I'm sorry. On that mood.
Well, David,
Yeah.
what I'm trying to ask is,
Aesthetic aspects and quality of life aspects, including light, air, and aesthetics and that type, things that would affect it. I guess it's the Chinese, forgot the full name of the case, but there's a body of law on that, yes, but I'm not sure how that fits in to our mission under, you know better than me, this is new to me here with these.
I think it'd be more appropriate as part of the secret review that'll be conducted by the planning board, as well as the site plan and special permit criteria that they'll be looking at as part of that application.
Yeah, but I think it may also be applicable here. I just don't know. I mean, it's applicable under CEQA, yes. Is it applicable under the consistency requirements? I'm not that conversant with them. I'm new. I mean, I'm reading them always. I have to see how they've been interpreted. I don't know.
Well, even those of us who've been doing this a while sometimes find that we go look at a particular policy and think about it in a different light from how we have in the past because of the particular factors that another application brings to light. So I don't think any of us can dispositively say that light and air doesn't have anything to do with any of the policies. But when it comes to time to make a consistency determination, we look at 44 policies and rule on consistency.
correct, Robert, Thomas. Are we going to have an input onto the secret decision-making process? Are they going to ask us for our input?
I believe you already have provided a memo. Is that correct?
Okay.
Have we provided a memo to the planning?
I thought we had.
In connection with the substance of what they're doing?
I unfortunately don't have it in front of me, but I thought we had.
I don't believe we've seen that. If we can get a copy of that, so we could be able to address those comments and concerns as well.
Because that should be, when is planning considering it?
Yeah, so you do have the ability to do that still if it hasn't been done. You had done your preliminary review and you came up with a list of comments that should be memorialized. But maybe that'll slightly change with the new information presented.
Okay, Mr. Joffrey, if we did, you'll get it. And if we didn't and I'm misremembering, then we still have the opportunity to do that, and I think intend to.
I do not have a memo in the record from the Coastal Commission.
All right, then we talked about it but didn't do it. Okay.
When are they going to be considering this, the planning for determinations?
We'll be going back before them. We have not
April-
placed on an agenda as of yet.
April
so when-
22nd is their next meeting.
April 22nd is their next, are they making,
So
what is
the
the,
applicant makes a submission in time.
I'm sorry? When is the time period for them to make the determination of significance?
So they will assume lead agency status at their next meeting.
Okay.
That's what, okay. So we let them have
right
lead agency status, but they haven't actually assumed it yet. That would indicate
Well,
to me that I'm misremembering and we didn't do a memo yet. Because we
They
usually
kind of
don't until they,
default. It's been 30 days, so they're kind of the default lead agency at this point.
Yeah.
Because there's no
Nobody's
objection.
objected to their declaration.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, maybe it would be helpful, because I know all agencies are urged to give the lead agency their comments in terms of just subjects that should be reviewed. Maybe we should all give them to you, or you can compile them, or we have them compiled, and then they can send over one letter to them from us. saying-
yeah, the right way to do this is by working group. And there's only so we're just barely a quorum on this anyway. I will volunteer to combine the comments with I think since I've been handing out stuff to Seamus because he's a hard worker, it's probably David's turn. David and Tony, if you two want to get together on a phone call with me, so we can come up with our preliminary comments for seeker purposes to give to the planning board as lead agency. We can always tell them twice. If they adopt next time, which we expect they will, and start their work as lead agency, we'll have another opportunity to tell them if we think of anything additional. Right, Greg?
Well, I think what Greg said was correct. I think after 30 days, they become by default the lead agency.
Okay, so
No
but
one
if they
else-
just take up their work for the first time next time, they won't have made a determination. So we may get 2 bites at the apple of telling them any concerns we have from a seeker standpoint.
Yeah, and please try and get it in the Friday before the planning board meeting.
Well,
so we can provide it to them.
So if they're going to deal with this on the 22nd, that would be the what's the date?
17th.
17th. Okay. So by the 17th, we should get them a memo to guide their work as lead agency.
Mr. Chairman, you made a point, and I'm going to put the shoe on the other foot for a moment, and I'm going to ask a question that you might not be able to have an answer for. I'm going to direct it, I think, to Ms. Mason. You indicated that you're barely a quorum, and given that 3 members recused themselves for this application, is there the opportunity to have an alternate 2 or even 3 included in your deliberations moving forward, in fairness to the applicant?
Chair, would you like me to answer?
Go ahead, because I think we all need the answer to that.
I believe we had discussed this previously, Chair, very quickly, but we do not have any provisions in our code for adding in alternates. And so right now there really isn't a path for doing so.
Or maybe alternatively, if we can ask the village board if there's that opportunity. I think
Yes, that is a
there-
possibility, but that would have to be for the commission to decide as a whole to present that to the Board of Trustees, and the Board of Trustees would have to be comfortable with moving forward with that.
So you're saying that you want temporary commissioners to sit in addition to the 4 regular commissioners who have not recused.
The zoning code, for the zoning purposes, the state law has a provision, doesn't it, Christie, that I'm sure it does. It says they can appoint alternates who will serve in the event of an absence or recusal. Does that also apply to this commission?
I'm sorry, you're talking about which zoning code? Our zoning code or the state?
State law is what it provides, it's enabling statute that says villages, and it could be also towns, can appoint for zoning purposes, they call them alternates. They're designated a certain number of them. I know we'd always urge they do this, but some people felt otherwise. It was never done. So in zoning, then it would be, the chair could say, well, I've got 2 members out, so alternate 1 and 2 sit down. Is that the case with the Harbor Zone Coastal under the state? Are there restrictions or?
I would have to look at that, but as far as I know, there's not a provision for alternates. And again, I'm happy to research that if that's something the commission wants me to look into. But as far as I know at this time, I am not aware of an alternate provision for this type of commission.
Let me put it this way, Mr. Joffrey, just to make sure that you're making the request that we find a way to have alternates sit on the commission for purposes of this application.
Yeah, effectively, I need 4 votes out of 4 for an application. I'm fully confident that all 4 of you are going to vote in favor of consistency for this application, but may the odds be ever in our favor.
Yeah, okay, but so you're requesting that we find a way to have alternate commissioners sit?
If possible.
Okay, well, we'll take it under advisement.
Thank you very much.
I think that's as far as we can get tonight with 139 Prospect. And so I think, Mr. Joffrey, you are finally off the hook.
I appreciate it. I thank you all for your time in conducting a meeting in this manner. And I
Thomas?
certainly wish you continued health and safety in this current pandemic.
Hang on, Tony, you
Yeah.
want to keep them on?
Can we just, I had a few stormwater questions, and I know we did discuss this last time, and some of it had to do with the, with the floodplain on the river. And so when we have a discharge, a stormwater discharge from the property, and we're at that 100-year storm, what happens to the water?
Well, again, Michael Stein, Hudson Engineering. So the system that our existing site is 100% impervious. And the proposed condition, again, we're 100% impervious. We had received the comments just to acknowledge from Code Sessions Office. However, part of our updating our design was waiting on the survey to come in. And so based upon our time frame when we received that in, we hadn't had time to update for this submission. With that said, our stormwater system is going to connect down to the corner of East Prospect and East Prospect. The flows are coming off the building. We're going to be putting in catch basins that are going to tie into that existing system. It's very similar to across the street at 172. We're putting in a mechanical separator. We're providing water quality. We're providing as much mitigation as we possibly can, and which would meet New York State DEC redevelopment requirements.
Right. So, Michael, I really appreciate that. Thank you. But when you're at the 100-year storm, that river comes up over the banks a certain degree, as Greg showed. And my concern is that when that happens, what happens to all the water that's hitting this property?
That is still being conveyed down to the corner. Right now, in the portion of the property that's in the 100-year flood zone, if you hit that 100-year flood and it does raise up to that point, that portion of the parking garage is basically built to be a flood compliant, where the water can flow in, the water can flow out. We're not usurping up any flood volume in order to accommodate the garage, because again, that volume will still be there and be available.
All right, and it doesn't back up into the structure or the property?
Well, ultimately it will. But again, that portion of the structure is a parking area. And if that area gets flooded, it gets flooded. But that water is allowed to pass in and pass out.
All right, and how about in that 100-year flood case, does the water then shed over to the neighbor's property?
No, we're not taking up any flood volume. We're going to be the same in the proposed condition as we are in the existing condition, and that's going to be part of what our flood analysis is going to be, based upon a volumetric analysis.
Okay. The other question I had was, have you guys done any borehole testing as far as contaminants on this site?
This is Rex Gedney. There were bore studies done. I believe there was 2. And I believe that was part of the initial application, which indicated the locations of the test holes, as well as depth and soil content. But there were no contaminants that I recall.
So do we want to request a phase 1 analysis at least?
I'd like to see where the borings were and the results. Because that would go to the
I
heart
mean,
of.
yeah, I mean, a phase one is a pretty standard procedure. So I don't know. Yeah, and then the other question I had, and I think this had come up last time, it appears that this property is over 50 years old. And so that may make it eligible for preservation either at the state or the federal level.
Mr. Chairman, we just received correspondence back from New York State Parks Recreation and Historic Preservation. We can provide a copy to that with our next submission. And I'll just read a portion of that letter, which indicates that's the opinion of OPRHP that no properties, including archaeological or historic resources listed in or eligible for the New York State and National Registers of Historic Places will be impacted by this project.
All right, so yeah, we would need documentation for that, okay?
Well, maybe we could raise that in our letter of planning, because otherwise we don't want the applicant to have to go every which way. It would seem to me for a lot of the information, we could point planning to that first.
I believe that's in your
We
package.
have that letter from
have it.
February 24th, actually.
Okay.
We have it, and the stormwater and the rest of the phase one concern we can put in our memo to planning as lead agency.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I think you are now off the hook, Mr. Joffrey. Thanks for your time.
Give me a moment to reach out.
Your families are safe and well going forward.
And you as well.
Well, okay, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
I'm just reaching out to the other commissioners to get them back on. Doreen, are you there?
Am I?
You are. We hear you.
You are. We can hear you.
Okay, I just got to get in touch with Andrew.
Doreen, can you mute your computer?
Computer?
Oh, my beautiful speakers are causing reverb, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Precise.
I'm also having a difficult time talking while I'm hearing it.
Likewise.
Hey, Greg, I'm back. I guess I gotta turn my video back on.
It's like Hollywood Squares. I like it.
I see it differently.
All right, and we have Greg, in the shuffle through those applications, I seem to have misplaced my agenda. What's our next item?
We actually have the Harbor Island piling replacement, the marine structures permit.
Thank you. Okay, so it's time to call this one.
Greg, did you hear me? You gotta turn my video back on.
I ask you to start. You should be able to do it yourself.
Oh, there we go.
Um,
Okay, I'm back.
Andrew's back as well.
Welcome back, commissioners. The next item on the agenda is the Harbor Island pile replacements. Who's presenting for the village?
That would be me, Hernani de Almeida, village engineer.
Hi, Hernani. Okay, go ahead.
Let me just make sure, Greg, will I have the opportunity to post things? Did you change my permissions?
Yeah, you should be able to share your screen. You could turn on your camera if you'd like.
I don't have a camera, but
Okay.
let me just.
Should be in the center of your.
Yeah, just give
bar
me
at the
one
bottom.
sec. Okay, so good evening, and we are here to discuss the replacement of several piles. Give me one sec. I seem to be sharing the wrong screen. There. I assume you guys can see this screen with the map here of the East and West Basin.
It's just popped for me. It's just popped back behind there. Okay.
Okay.
Now I've got it.
Got a little bit of lag.
We have presented to you tonight the replacement of several steel piles in the West Basin and East Basin area and 5 floating docks. We're replacing these piles because they are severely corroded and in danger of falling and perhaps injuring somebody or creating an obstruction in the harbor and making things a lot worse for our harbor master than necessary. This is normally you'd replace piles as part of a maintenance, you know, as they decay, you'd replace them. In this particular case, we're replacing 11 piles and they're located, I don't know if you could see the little cursor that I have in the East Basin near the near the docks, near the transient dock and the boat ramp, and in the West Basin, as you can see throughout all our docks in the West Basin. Okay. We submitted an application or I submitted an email to the DEC, and they gave us a letter of non-jurisdiction determination here, or jurisdictional determination that we don't need a permit through them. I also went through the Army Corps of Engineers national permit and found that we are covered under the national permit for maintenance. With respect to some of the questions that were already given to me to reply to, I think I took care of all the questions with the exception of one, which I mistakenly looked at the hazard mitigation plan. The question was, how does this project conform to the harbor management plan? I mistakenly often go to a hazard mitigation plan, and that time I did not understand or didn't realize what I was supposed to be answering. And with that respect, yeah, I took a look through the harbor management plan, and yeah, we not only conform to everything the harbor management plan has, but the harbor management plan endorses what we're doing here under our maintenance objective. And under the harbor management plan, we're obligated to perform what we're asking to do here, which is promote the use of the harbor and its recreational asset to the village and fiduciary asset. I mean, it does bring a revenue stream, and that's identified in the plan to maintain that revenue that the harbor allows us to have. I know it's late, so I'm just going to get right to, I think everybody understands the project. They understand what we're trying to do. It's just replacement of the worst 5 floating docks and the worst 11 piles, and in place with the same steel pile replacing it, the same wood floating docks replacing it. It should be said though that we had a plan to replace all the docks and maybe rearrange them if our consultancies fit. We haven't gone out to bid. We haven't done an RFP for consulting services yet. That was supposed to be slated for next year. Now with everything going on with COVID, I don't know what the village board is going to want to do, but that is not part of this application at this time.
Okay. Can you describe for me? Let me go first. Can you describe for me how during the actual work you're going to control environmental impacts from the removal and driving of piles, et cetera?
Sure. Well, they generally pull the pile. They set up their floating dock, and they set up their not their floating dock, but they set up their rig right next to the piles, and they just pull them right out of the mud, and they, with the vibratory hammer, put the new piles right into place where the old ones were. And they do have to take the same place as the old ones because our docks are lined up with these things, and we need them to anchor the same way.
Avoiding negative environmental impact from turbidity caused by the removal and replacement? That
would be done with turbidity curtains. The contractor does already have these turbidity curtains. They're using them right now, I believe, down in Glen Island on another project. And these will be brought up. I hope you could see this on the screen. These will be brought up to serve for this project as well.
Okay. And do we have anything documenting the absence of negative environmental impact from the work based on the use of the turbidity curtains and the method of work that you've just described?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Do we have anything in the record that documents that there will not be an adverse environmental impact from the work given the method you've described?
Well, with respect to the contract, the contractor is obligated to make sure he protects his workplace. I mean, here's our contract here, which was provided to the commission about a month ago or so. And you'll notice in our general provisions, excuse me, and I'll show you where it's outlined this way. The answer is yes, and I'll show you where it's outlined. Here we have the responsibilities of the contractor, where they're supposed to use anything that all the tools that they have, all the tools they need to accomplish the work. So that's the first part, that they have to provide everything they need to accomplish the work in a responsible way. As far as the environmental claims here.
Well, Hernani, you also indicated in your memo that you would follow all of the recommendations of Sven.
Of Sven Hoger.
Yes,
right.
yes.
He's in the memo.
He had those
the
recommendations,
record.
which really was the turbidity curtain, was the main thing.
Right.
And the
Okay.
vibratory
Vibratory
hammer.
hammer.
And the vibratory hammer, which was already being part of his rig.
Right. Okay. So so by using the vibratory hammer as the method of placing the piles and the turbidity curtain during the work, you're complying with the environmental assessment given to us by Sven Hoger, who said that given those conditions, it will not have a negative environmental impact.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. That's my questions. I know Doreen has some.
So on the application for erecting a marine structure, the actual application, I know, Hernani, you mentioned national permit. I'm not sure. Do you mean nationwide?
Nationwide permit. Sorry, nationwide permit 3.
Okay. So we don't have information. It would be great to have information. This didn't go out to bid yet?
This did go out to bid. It's been awarded. And we're just waiting to get started on the construction.
Yeah. So when Hernani said it didn't go out to bid, he was talking about a larger project, doing a lot more work to bring the harbor up to a higher standard.
Okay.
Yeah,
I have a question about that, but it says the applicant must check with the following federal, state, and local agencies to determine whether their approvals, permits, and certificates are required for this project. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Department of State Office of Coastal Management, Village of Mamaroneck, us, Environmental Protection Agency, Office of General Services, and unfortunately the Landmarks Advisory Committee in the Village of Mamaroneck, but they're not in operation. Additionally, what we don't have, which is clear in the application, that drawings must be accompanied by a copy of a survey by a licensed land surveyor showing existing conditions.
We provided that.
That was provided.
We provided that. That's part of your packet.
That I don't see within the records. That I missed.
Here's the one of the West Basin, done by Spinelli. And you see all the piles here. These are our docks. Yeah. And then for the East Basin.
Don't move this one, because I have a question on it. Go ahead.
And on the East Basin, we have a similar situation where here's the wood dock and the seawall. And if you...
A total of 11 piles are being removed and replaced. Can you show us which one?
Yes, of course. Also part of your packet, you'll find for the West Basin, these are the piles in red that are being replaced.
Okay.
And these are right now, these are the sections of floating docks. You see these two little rectangles here. I can zoom right in.
Yeah, if you could zoom in, that would be great.
Yeah. So these are the two docks right here. that we've identified so far as being the worst. Look, they're floating docks. They're 6
Later
by.
project, right?
Sorry, say
Or
that
is
again.
that going to be done? That's what I was confused on.
Okay, so these are floating docks, and they're just falling apart. The wood is rotting, and we're just going to replace them with the same exact dimensions, 6 by 20
Right,
docks,
right.
floating docks. We're just going to float 2 out in this location and float 2 new ones back in. If at the day they're out there, and the harbor master says, you know what, this one doesn't look so bad. This one over here is a lot worse. Let's just keep this one and just float it down and swap it around. At the end of the day, we're going to have 5 new floating docks replacing existing floating docks. We're
Right.
not adding anything else
Right.
or anything
That's
like
the
that.
issue.
Okay.
That's not the issue. The pile, no, please zoom in again.
Oh, sure.
The pile that is closest to the seawall, that's in red, there is Spartina there. And I also notice quite often in mean low water, that dock rests on the mud.
Yeah, but
So I'm wondering why we're going to replace a pile to allow a dock to rest on the mud.
These docks and piles, while we understand they could be redesigned to better serve the harbor and the public and our use and our needs, and in the future could address those concerns. That is one of the reasons why we want to redo all the docks. We want to try to make them ADA compliant as well.
I understand that. However,
that's not part of
I think
this.
our chair asked if there weren't going to be any environmental impacts. We already have an environmental impact right there.
That pile does not touch any grass.
The dock hits the mud, Joe.
Not on all tides. I mean, you'll get it on a moon tide with an offshore breeze. But on the other side of that dock, you got 4 or 5 feet of water where the dinghies are. I mean, they dredged years ago, and some do touch on, a few moon tides without going tide, but it's a replacement in kind. If
We're gonna have to triangulate.
I asked a more specific question, which was adverse environmental impact from the work.
House. Right.
From the work.
Right.
Which Sven addressed as well, as you mentioned.
Can that be zoomed in even further? Because I'm trying to figure out exactly where this is. Oh, okay. I see. Great. All right. Just mentioning that because the bottom is right there. You could see it in the picture. But that's the best we could do.
Yeah, we're actually obligated under the harbor management plan to maintain what's out there. We're obligated under, I could find out the policy number for you.
The policy number in the harbor management plan?
Yeah, there's a policy number that says we're obligated to maintain these docks in a safe manner.
Yeah. I could look it up too, but we're not going to worry about it.
In any case,
Yeah. It's there. I understand.
We have to replace these. We're obligated to under our own plan. We're just not only just doing.
No, I understand. Agreed.
So this is Tony. Our commission about 6 to 8 months ago had asked for a study of marine structures for the cumulative environmental impact and the impacts of climate change on all of the standards for these docks. So that has not, I haven't seen hide nor hair of that. And I'm concerned that we're doing this replacement project and we don't have that study. So to me, that study is very important to the village, for the village, and I think we need it. And I don't see myself finding this thing consistent until I get a study like that that tells me, okay, this is the plan for the village for the next 25 years with climate change. So why don't we have that study?
Tony, that's a great question that you have about where do we go in the future and what do we do as a municipality and to be more aware of where we're going with the future of the use of the harbor, recreational and otherwise. But this project is not large enough and it's just supposed to take care of immediate concerns of rotting piles.
Yeah, but here, Hernani, let me interrupt. Emergency work, rotting piles, this is, you know, this kind of is business as usual. And to me, business as usual in this case, we're spending taxpayers' money, and I think we should have the study before we do this work. I was very, very insistent on this 6 to 8 months ago, and I really wanted to get the study done. Now you're before us, we don't have the study, and you're asking for us to say this is consistent. And like I say, I have trouble swallowing that.
We've brought the concept to the Board of Trustees. We've aggressively looked for grant funding to do a larger study. We haven't moved on it yet. It's not over.
Great.
We're going to continue looking to find the money and get it funded, but this is an immediate need. And you know, the harbor needs to be maintained. It needs to be open this summer. And while I completely agree with you, I think those avenues have been approached fully at this point.
Great.
The timelines don't make it work. You know,
I'm
it's
not
just not
blaming,
possible.
Yeah, I'm not. I know you've been trying, but believe me, I said what I said, and I believe we need to study.
And also, just to clarify, this isn't consistency. It's just the marine structure permit.
Marine structure.
Consistency applies to marine structures permits, Greg.
Yeah, it's not an action that's subject to consistency. If you look at 240-5, which I'll bring up again, it lists the actions that are subject to consistency. This is one of the exempt actions.
Yeah, we're well aware that our consistency law is not kosher. I mean, that's been documented over 2 years, and we haven't moved forward with that either.
Okay, but the statute as it exists now makes this a exempt, and therefore we will only on the. Yeah.
Understood.
Okay, other commissioners? Seamus, Martin, David?
Nothing from me.
Nothing from me. No, nothing from me.
Andrew?
You do have to open a public hearing. Sorry to interrupt.
Right, I know I do. Okay, at this time we'll, though I don't expect we're going to get a lot of public participation on this one. At this time, I open the floor for public comment on the replacement, in-kind, in-place replacement of 11 piles and 5 floating docks. As a reminder to anybody watching who wants to participate, if you're on the Zoom meeting, you can use the raise hand function center bottom of your screen. If you're not capable of doing that or having any difficulty, you can email Greg Cutler.
gcutler@vomny.org.
And let him know you're trying to comment, and he will facilitate that. I'm going to give you a minute and a half to see if any of you out there want to be heard on this.
I have nothing.
Yeah. Okay, I don't think we have public comment on that, and I think we can close the public comment portion. All right, it's time to vote on this application.
I'll motion to vote. So this is approval of a marine structure.
So approval of a marine structure. Commissioner O'Rourke?
In favor, if we're at the voting point now. I don't know if we had to formally open the vote up.
Are we voting on consistency or seeker?
Neither of those things. We're voting on a marine structure. We're voting on granting the marine structure permit. It's a consistency exempt under the current statute, which I understand you don't like, but under the current statute, it's exempt. It is just the grant of a marine structure permit.
And it's also a type 2,
Type 2.
or recommended type 2.
Action, correct? Greg?
You have a resolution before you, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. Greg, since we have a resolution, can we put that up on the screen so everybody can take a look at it? There's no reason to do this blind and have confusion about what it is we're voting on. when we
Betty Ann,
can
is
just
that
put it up.
attached to the agenda, or Christy,
Yes,
do you have
sir.
that? Okay.
It's attached to the agenda.
That was my bad. I should have remembered that.
Greg, I can't share it because I'm not technically in my remote desktop, so I wouldn't. be-
Okay, I'll pull it up.
That's why I asked Thomas.
No, you're right. Thank you. We have a resolution. We should look at it before we vote it. The resolution may spec that it's a type 2.
It does.
And how is it a type 2 action?
Subsection.
Replacement in kind.
Or it should
Yeah.
have stated it was a type 2.
Let's see.
Greg, is there any way to put up the seeker regs for type 2 action and an unlisted action?
Sorry?
The seeker regulations, the type 2 list
Yeah.
and the unlisted actions list. Is there any way to put that up on the screen?
If that's the wish of the commission.
Well, we might as well lay this to rest. Go ahead and pull up the type 2 action reg.
There's one. There's another one.
This is sub 2, isn't it? C2?
This is, yeah, type 2.
Oh, but
See,
it's
this is
C2,
a
right?
list of type 2. I could see it being 1 or 2, depends on what you consider substantial.
I think it's substantial, but 2 is, it's a replacement, rehabilitation, or reconstruction.
Right.
In kind, that's what it is. I don't think it has to be.
I don't read that as saying that the project has to be substantial one, just that the changes can't be substantial, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Right.
But I mean,
Correct.
it's angels on ahead of a pen whether it falls within C1 or C2.
Isn't it a replacement?
It's
I mean,
a
replacement.
rehabilitation. It's not a full
Fine.
replacement.
Same
It's replacement of piles. It's not, the whole structure isn't being replaced.
No, but it's replacement, rehabilitation, or reconstruction.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care, but I don't think it's a repair or maintenance. It's not a maintenance item, is it?
No.
No.
That's a good point. I agree with that. I think one is different, I think.
Yeah.
You have to be artful in these things. It's not an exact science.
Well, but whether it's under C1 or C2 produces the same result.
Yes.
Correct. Unlisted is, it doesn't.
There is no list of unlisted. It's either,
Unlisted is it doesn't meet the requirements here.
Or of type 1. Yeah.
or it meets a
Or-
threshold of type 1.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so let's look at that resolution again. Okay, that's the resolution. Commissioner O'Rourke moved that we vote on this. Can we get a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, Martin, you seconded it. Commissioner Neufeld,
Yes.
Vice Chair.
Is Andrew
We
on?
lose Andrew.
Am I on now? You
Yeah, I
can
can
now?
hear you now.
Okay, aye.
Commissioner Galber,
No.
Commissioner Roney,
Yes.
and I'm a yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, that deals with all the permit applications. We also have work session, which hopefully we can pop through pretty quickly.
We're not doing Phillips Park Road
Yeah, Phil's Park. Road.
Lead Agency
I'm sorry.
regulation.
I'm sorry, I had an old, I got the wrong thing printed and I'm scrambling to find the current agenda. I had the old one hanging around. So we do have Phillips Park Road. All right.
So the applicant is not appearing tonight. This is just a notice of intent. Because you moved your meeting to this early date, they weren't able to submit. They were planning on submitting for the April 15th meeting.
Which they did. They submitted a full submission. Actually, we received 13 emails today of submissions for 355 Phillips Park for the April 15th meeting.
So that will be an opportunity for preliminary review and seeker comments to the planning board. But you can still, make you can challenge their lead agency status if you think it's appropriate at this earlier stage.
I'm not sure, Greg, but I have a question. Where is the coastal assessment form among the documents, Betty Ann? Hello?
They probably didn't submit it. I don't think. Betty Ann, is that part of the planning board application? Let me
pull it up.
Let me just make sure.
Cover letter says a coastal assessment form was filed, but I'm having trouble finding it.
Okay. Well, they haven't submitted to you yet, so it will definitely be in there. And if it's not in the planning board submission, we'll make sure that it gets in there.
Right.
Since
Okay.
It's a very early submission.
Okay. Does anyone want to be the lead agency for SECRA on Phillips Park Road?
We don't issue a permit, so we really don't have standing to.
I'm not going to disagree with that. Okay, then I think we can move on. Right, it automatically planning becomes lead agency if we don't challenge for it in 30 days, right? Okay.
Correct.
Then for once, the absolute right thing to do is nothing. Okay.
Really, we could submit comments.
Oh, we'll do that. But in terms of challenging for lead, we need not and should not act at this point because none of us thinks that's the right thing to do. Okay. We are now up to wetland law, LWRP update, and those are just work session items. I circulated to everybody a wetland law draft that I think has everybody's comments incorporated. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at that?
When did you do that, Thomas?
In about a month ago.
Really?
You comment. I got more comments from you than anyone, Doreen. I know you.
No, I know. I thought you compiled them and then reissued them. That's where I'm a little confused. No.
Yeah, I sent it back around after your comments in February, so everybody would mid-February, so everybody would have it. And I think the last time I
okay, yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Has everyone else had a chance to take a look at that?
I have.
Yes.
Okay. The draft was included within the packet. Now, of course, we don't pass laws, so it becomes a recommendation to the Board of Trustees that they pass it. It becomes essentially their working draft, and then they decide on it. Does anybody want to comment or propose a change to our draft wetland law at this time?
May I make a comment? And this is totally your purview. The previous HCZM had thought to take over jurisdiction on those applications that don't require site plan and require wetland permit. But at the time, and I'm not saying you have to do this, but at the time they thought it would make sense for the planning board to continue doing wetland permits on applications that only have a site plan as the only other action involved. Up to you. Just pointing out that was a previous suggestion, and we may have to go back and check the current draft LWRP to make sure that that's not in the current draft LWRP.
So
To
we
make sure
should
it's
check that.
consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, we should check that to make sure it's consistent before we vote that. What do people think
Well,
of that?
you know what, Greg? Greg brings up an interesting point that reminds me of what's in our harbor management plan. What's in our harbor management plan, basically, is that the planning board, when it comes to wetlands permits, is responsible for the land side portions of the application. And we're responsible for the water side. And at times, we might consider a joint review with the planning board. I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't, but it's documented in our harbor management plan that way. That's why we're having such problems on one application.
So is that something that we need to embody in the wetlands law, though?
I think, as I recall, I'm reading it again, I'm just scanning it. I think it puts the jurisdiction in our hands, doesn't it?
The harbor management?
Thomas?
Okay. Yeah.
No, I'm asking. The harbor management plan puts jurisdiction on us for
No. I'm talking about the draft wetlands law.
Yeah, I think it does, but that's a fair question. It's late and we're tired.
May I make another comment just to
go
clarify the LWRP? So the current draft LWRP that the state just reviewed, it states that the LWRP suggests we transfer jurisdiction from the planning board to HCZM for wetland permit applications coupled with marine structures or perimeter permit application before HCZM. The planning board would retain jurisdiction to determine wetland permit applications coupled with a site plan or subdivision application before the planning board. This will eliminate duplication of efforts and cost to applicants.
Right.
It also talks about cleaning up noticing requirements, which I think is something that the board is currently working on. We want to have, or at least staff is recommending that all of the notice requirements for all the different applications that we have be the same. So it's easy for us to enforce, it's easy for the applicants to understand, and it just be a cleaner situation in general.
Okay, I know that. Thanks for bringing that up, Greg. I know that the Board of Trustees would really like to get that application moving forward quickly. We haven't spent a lot of time on the application, in part because there was a sense that we wanted to both work on the new LWRP and also get the wetlands law done before we dealt with the application. But I'm now hearing from trustees that they want to move the joint application to get forward as fast as they can. We now have our next meeting in 15 days, which is good because it gets us a chance to turn some things around really quickly. What I want to do, it sounds like we've got just a few outstanding housekeeping items on the wetlands law, making sure that it in fact does what the LWRP now suggests we do, which is if something is site plan only, that is entirely within our jurisdiction. We can make sure it reads consistent with that, make sure we're all comfortable with the way we handle the tree law issues, clear cutting where we've adopted pieces of definitions from various places. Greg, if you could deal with the consistency with the LWRP concerning site plan only issues, if you could read it for that and make sure that our draft does what the LWRP envisions that we do. If anyone else wants to look at the draft for last licks and determine if there's any changes you want, do we think that we could have a vote on it and pass it on to trustees on the 15th?
Oh, definitely.
If I may, did you want Bob and I to do a thorough review of it? Or is this something that the commission wants to handle themselves and then comfortable with working with the Board of Trustees on it and our input as needed?
Well, wouldn't the Board of Trustees seek your advice in reviewing it if they so choose to, adopt it?
You're going to read it anyway at the board level. So I just figure let's do that once.
Forward. Okay, that's fine.
because I know I know our mayor's going to refer it to you and ask you to read it. So
Yeah.
let's just do that once.
Okay.
Okay. So last comments. Remember, it's for open meeting reasons. Comments can go to staff and can go to less than a quorum. So just staff and me, please, for comments on the LWRP draft. Last comments in a week, please. That way we've got everything in and have time to consider it before we vote on it. We're going to vote the wetland law on the 15th and hopefully have something that we can propose to trustees. Greg, can you circulate for next time for a work session the draft application that's before trustees so that we can comment on it? They're looking at one, right?
Maybe I misrepresented what I was trying to say. I was talking about the notice requirements specifically. We haven't looked at the draft we haven't looked at the applications yet.
Okay. Is there a working draft application?
Not at this point, but it is something that I've talked to Betty Ann about, and we've started to identify inconsistencies on all of our applications. So we've got inconsistencies on our noticing laws that are on the books, and then we have inconsistencies in our applications against our laws. There's a lot. It's very messy.
Okay, we should be able to. All right. So what's up before them in the immediate future is notice requirements. Yes. So then our wetlands law has to be consistent in all of its notice respects with the other provisions they're working on. Can you troubleshoot it for that? Troubleshoot the draft for that so that we've got a recommendation from you in the next week or so that we'll be ready to vote that?
Yes.
And okay, so we've got a little more time on application. LWRP update. So that's wetlands. LWRP update, where are we?
Weren't we supposed to receive the draft that the Department of State worked on with comments?
We've sent those comments to the commission several times. Jamie Ethier had kind of redlined the document, and then we also have a memo from Bill Sharp. I've done a red line of myself trying to address Jamie's comments. I forwarded that to Andrew and Thomas, and I think they're still reviewing what I've provided.
Okay, so that's on me. By the 15th, I will. Well, Andrew, you and I should undertake, if we can, to just lock that down and circulate to everybody a week ahead of the 15th. So that's in another week.
I'd be happy to help on that too. I don't know if that's efficient or not, and whether it's allowed. Let me know if you need any more support.
Well, sure, it's allowed, and thank you. I really appreciate, I really appreciate somebody helping take the administrative load that falls on chair and vice chair. That's great. Greg, if you could circulate the red line to Seamus also. The three of us will put our heads together, see if we want to change anything that's in that red line or adopt all changes, and lock that down within a week so that everybody's got a chance to consider all three and hopefully vote LWRP and wetlands law, not all three, two, LWRP and wetlands law. Go ahead.
I have a question. Weren't we to receive from Greg, not you and Andrew and Seamus working on it, an actual Word doc or PDF of all of the comments that the Department of State made?
I believe I've sent that a couple times. I can send it again.
Circulated.
Isn't it posted with the agenda as well?
I think so. It's a PDF. It's not a Word doc.
Well, I said both because I don't know which it is.
Yeah, it's a PDF. I'll send it again. I'll make sure you get it.
Thank you.
You make sure I get it too?
Yes.
Thanks.
I'll just send it to the whole commission, just so everyone has it.
Okay, so we got everybody else has got a week to do last look at wetlands law, and me and Andrew and Seamus have a week to do last look at LWRP proposed changes, and that's our two work session items. Anything else on any of those, on either of those two?
Nope.
We're going to address Mr. Sharp's memo.
Yeah, so I've started to do that. There are still some things in the draft. You'll see when it's circulated. There's still a few areas where I think we may need some additional help from outside consultants. I'm not sure yet. We can see, what resources the community can bring to bear on filling in the holes. But yes, I tried to address all of Bill Sharp's comments.
What do you mean by outside consultants?
So there's the inventory section, like the sightings of endangered species and rare threatened species haven't been updated since 1976.
Sure it has. We did it with inventory in 2014.
I haven't seen it, so if you have that, or you can tell me who has it, that would be tremendously helpful.
Maybe our former chair, Cindy Goldstein, if she still has it. I can look and see if I retain those documents. I don't know if I did or not.
Yeah, because I worked with her on the last draft, and that was not included.
And as far as inventory is concerned, for the past 5+ years that I've been on the commission, we've been talking about doing a walk through the village so that we could see the rivers and all kinds of things for ourselves and invite the public. That doesn't seem to be getting off the ground. I don't know if the current commissioners are interested in doing that, but it was discussed.
Well, not at the moment.
I'm not suggesting it. I'm not suggesting it. But I'll be dead and buried by the time the LWRP gets done. That's for sure.
We can zoom and do a street view through the village.
My goal is to make that not be true. Okay.
Well, if you walk the rivers, you'll see really what's going on with the erosion. It's pretty terrible. But go ahead.
Yeah, I can speak firsthand. I live right up against the Mamaroneck River.
Start from the dam.
Okay.
And go to the mouth.
Okay, so I think we've hit the end of the work session business. Is there any other business?
Minutes.
Also the outfall jetty. Can we talk about the outfall jetty a little bit?
Thank you, Andrew. Outfall jetty. So there's a live question, right? Whether we can get the county to do something different if we're not happy with this plan.
Just as a quick note, this is not on your agenda. So I'd be wary of discussing items that aren't on your agenda.
Oh, we never put this on.
Mm-mm.
Well, we are meeting in 2 weeks.
Old business.
Can add it to our agenda. Can't we add it to our agenda? We haven't done minutes yet.
I mean, you haven't done minutes, but it's the whole idea, I think, of giving some type of notice as to what you're going to be discussing.
It's an open meeting issue. The public can weigh in. Though we can certainly working group something. We can certainly working group something. Andrew, a lot falls on you. Somebody else ought to help with this. We ought to have two people to pin down this issue of whether we can do something about something different from the outfall jetty proposal that the county's currently looking at. And if somebody else will agree to help Andrew out with that, hopefully we can get a solid answer about what the limits of our power there are, our powers there are, and report back on the 15th.
I can volunteer, and it's the procedure that other agencies need to follow with their determinations and consistency. It's a pretty simple matter, and we as a commission can respond to the permit issuance that happened.
Okay, two-person working group, Doreen, Andrew.
Yep. I've made some good inroads on this today. Greg, can you just give us a current status where that project is? A DOS signed off on it?
DOS has given consistency concurrence on the amendment to the project. They previously gave consistency, I think, in 2016, and a wetland permit was issued by Department of Environmental Conservation.
And is there a start date there, or is it going out to bid? Where are we?
I'd have to follow up with the county to find that out. I don't know.
Okay, we'll talk tomorrow, Doreen.
Okay.
Guess so.
Yeah, okay. I know what the concerns are, but it's not fair to have a substantive discussion of it when we haven't told the public we're going to do that. Okay, I think that's all the business that we've got in front of us except minutes. Motion to approve the minutes.
I have a question. If there are missing words, do I have to amend them again?
Oh, there's errors in the minutes we got to fix.
Not errors, but I noticed that the substance, and it doesn't have to be lengthy, of a couple of things on my statements sort of ended. And I'm looking for the pages right now.
Well,
maybe on page 3.
They are to be action minutes. So if you have revisions on your statements, maybe if you'd like to send your statement to me, we can revise the minutes to reflect your proper statements. But
don't the minutes become legal minutes after 2 weeks?
no, they need to be presented within 2 weeks as draft.
Okay. I could do that if I can edit this PDF. That would be great. It's simple stuff.
Okay.
All right, you can edit, and we can deal with the minutes next time.
We can move them to the meeting on the 15th.
All right, I'll do that. Thanks.
Chair, very quickly. So I was just looking at it more open meetings law, doing a quick run through. And in terms of notice, the requirements are that you notice the time and the place of the meeting. General practice is that you provide an agenda with items that you're going to discuss. If you truly wanted to discuss the outfall jetty, you could. You're not technically bound by that agenda. You can add it. So if you did want to move forward with the discussion, I believe you could. But if you are concerned that you don't have proper notice to the public and you want the public to hear this discussion, I would hold off on doing it until it's noticed on the agenda.
Well, we found a good workaround. We've got a working group and we'll report back in 15 days. So I think that probably moves that forward effectively.
Perfect.
Okay, I think we should gavel this closed unless anybody else has an issue that we need to deal with tonight.
I'll second.
Motion to adjourn.
I'm gonna
Thank
go home.
you, everyone. Have a good night.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, folks.
Hi.
Stay
Stay
safe,
safe.
everybody.
Bye.
Good night.